So hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to. So we are back with a brand new movie on what if Naruto locked Emerald and massaged her whole day. But before we start, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Now let's begin the story. Naruto hummed in satisfaction as he laid the finishing touches to the bowl of ramen in front of him. It was a delicious serving of miso ramen, which was steaming hot and looking extremely appealing. Everything from the garnish to the broth looked and smelled absolutely delectable. He almost wanted to eat it himself, but that wouldn't do. What would his customers think if they saw the chef slurping up their orders? The cozy and homey reputation his shop had built up would vanish in an instant. That would be sacrilege. If people didn't recommend his shop to others, more customers wouldn't come. And then those people would miss out on the food of the gods. Ramen was technically the food of gods, since it was his favorite food, but enough of getting off topic. If the citizens of Vacuo didn't revel in the glory of ramen, then it wouldn't spread throughout Remnant as a result. The who would worship the fu. Oi brat. Would you shut up about ramen for one goddamn second? We're trying to sleep in here. He was cut off from his tirade as a voice boomed in his head. He was wondering where his plushy companion was. Seriously, just because Kurama can't eat food, it doesn't give him the right to be salty when others enjoy ramen. Who the hell are you calling a plushie, meatbag? Come into your mindscape for a second and I'll show you how we eat stuff. Kurama goaded. Naruto grew a tick mark on his forehead as he retreated into his mind. His mind was far from what it was in his early years. Whereas earlier, his mind was full of dimly lit hallways and dank sewers, now it was exponentially larger, and consisted of 8 different biomes. A desert for Shukaku, a lake for Isobu, a meadow for Kakuo. A swamp for Seiken, a replica of the mountains of Kumogakure for Matabi and Gyuki. A volcano for Son Goku, a rainforest for Chome, and finally, a burning castle of fire and brimstone for Kurama. Why and how were all 9 of them together in his seal, you might ask? The answer is simple. After the 4th Shinobi War, the Biju were relatively free, and were respected instead of feared. In that time, the elemental nations had recovered and were on the path to progress. The Shinobi alliance was going strong, even the minor villages were aligning themselves with the cause of world peace, and life as a whole was generally good. Kakashi-sensei had become the Rokudame Hokage shortly after, with Naruto himself in line for the position of Nanadem. All his friends were surprisingly and conveniently paired together. No, seriously, that was a series of coincidences no one saw coming. Sasuke took Sakura along for his Journey of Atonement, or whatever edgy title he gave it, the emo bastard. Kiba and Hinata ended up together, after she got tired of waiting for his answer. It wasn't his fault that he completely forgot about her confession. He'd gone 8 tails for Kami's sake. He didn't even remember her getting stabbed, let alone her confession. Shikamaru and Ino were in a relationship, which he of course found troublesome, so were Lee and Tenten, Shoji and Karui. So he was the only one left single among the rookies. Somewhere in the Pure Lands, Aburame Shino was sulking while crouched in a corner. He was tracing circles with his fingers on the ground while a cloud of depression hung over his head. Everyone always forgot about him, he thought, while continuing tracing his circles. Since one of his dreams was to have a family, this got him down in the dumps. Even after he became the Hokage, he was still single. This peace lasted for a good 20 years. Then the Otsutsuki happened. Those 3 stupid rabbits came down from whatever place they lived in, and started hunting the Biju again. He had hoped against all hope, that the peace they fought for would last. But the second one of the major villages was threatened. They gave up their Biju out of fear. This was an action that infuriated Naruto to no end. With the help of Sasuke and those broken Rinnegan of his, they had managed to defeat the threat of Momoshiki or whatever his name was. But this ordeal led Naruto to a sobering realization: humans suck. Seriously, after the Biju did so much for them, suffered so much due to them, they still gave them up at the first sign of danger. He had had enough of the power-hungry ways of humans, and approached the Biju through their shared connection with a proposal. Seal themselves within Naruto and then leave the elemental nations via Sasuke taxi. After making his points, the Biju agreed, as they too were fed up, and as they didn't need human interaction to live, they would be fine anywhere as long as they were together. Also, his seal was powered by the Shinigami itself, so it was much more flexible in accommodating them. So, they did the sealing, and Naruto became technically the new Jubi Jinchuriki. And since he already had Ashura's chakra, one can connect the dots. As a result, Naruto became more powerful than Kaguya was. He decided to remain in the nations to gauge what effects his decision would have, and exactly as he had predicted, Childhood Part 2 feed began. Whispers of monster and demon started floating in hushed tones, and the villages tried to subtly control him like they did the Biju. Naruto decided that, since he was still present, The power imbalance would be too severe if he were to remain allied to any hidden village. Thus, with a heavy heart, Naruto pulled a Sasuke, resigned as Hokage and left Konoha to become a wanderer. It was then that he discovered he was now a chakra entity, much like Kurama, thus making him effectively immortal. He wandered around as a sage, helping people whenever possible, with his shiny new Rinnegan. About 10 years later, Sasuke died on a mission for the village, and since the blood feud between Indra and Ashura had ended, they wouldn't reincarnate anymore. So Indra's chakra latched on to the closest similar source, Naruto. Now Naruto had become even more powerful, and since Kagaya was a goddess, that made him a god. He left the elemental nations via Yomotsu Hirasaka, and decided to open a rift to a random dimension. It was how he ended up in a place called Remnant, with 4 kingdoms, rampant racism and a legend of 2 gods. Well, it didn't matter to him, since he was here just to relax and spend the rest of his days in peace. He arrived in Vacuo city of Vacuo Kingdom. Since he didn't know about this world, he decided to hang around there. He changed his appearance to hide his horns and whisker marks, as he was technically human, and had enough of being seen as a freak for one lifetime. He then opened Ichimaki Ramen, a combination of his beloved Ichiraku and his own last name Uzumaki. It had been 3 years since then. His little shop was already a regular haunt of the locals, as his warm food came at a cheap price, and was extremely delicious. He also did not discriminate against faunus, which was another plus in his book. All in all, Ichimaki was a place where anyone would be welcome. Snapping out of his reverie, he glared at the 9-tailed fox. "Kurama, aren't you taking it a bit far with the whole, I'm the almighty Kyuubi-sama bit?" he asked the fox, who was sitting on a burning throne while cackling madly. "What would you know, foolish human? Call me plushie again and I'll eat you," Kurama warned. "But you're so fluffy, and when I hug you I just sink into your fur," Naruto muttered something which Kurama didn't catch. "What was that last part, brat?" Naruto mumbled, fidgeting slightly. "Speak up," Kurama bellowed, making Naruto flinch. "You have toe beans, okay," Naruto shouted, then his eyes widened and he slapped his hand over his mouth, when he realized what he'd let slip. Kurama was getting even redder than he already was. Whether it was from anger or embarrassment, was anyone's guess. Naruto, being the idiot that he was, continued to dig himself into a deeper hole. "Yes, and they are so soft, ya know. One day you were sleeping, and I booped one of them, and it was such a surreal XP." Naruto didn't get to continue as he was forcibly ejected from his mind. "Stupid fox," he muttered while heading out to serve the ramen. His cage bunshin were already cleaning the mess and preparing to close up. "Don't mind him, Naruto, he's just being tsundere," Matabi chimed in. "I most certainly am." Kurama was cut off as Naruto closed their link. He went to the seating area, and saw that there was only one person inside. To be fair, it was about 10 in the night, so he wasn't all that surprised. "Here you go, sir, 1 miso ramen," he said as he set the bowl down. The man thanked him and started eating. Taking his cue, Naruto went inside to finish up cleaning. After about 15 minutes, the man paid up and left. Naruto was just about to pull the shutter down, when he felt a presence trying to invade his mind. He wasn't too worried, of course, as anything strong enough to get past his own defenses would be promptly repelled by his tenants. No, what surprised him that he didn't sense any malice of killing intent, just sadness and hunger. So he let the charade continue, hoping to see it through. From the corner of his eye, he spotted who was most likely the perpetrator, a little girl with green hair. She was a frail little thing, clad in rags that could barely be called such, and was thinner than a stick. She looked to be about 6 or 7 years old, and she looked much worse than he was at that age. Suddenly, her image was overshadowed by that of a small blonde boy, just a little kid looking to get his next meal in a cruel world. No one to care for them, having to fend for themselves. He at least had old man Hokage, but this girl had no one. It reminded him of how he got introduced to the Ichirakus. The parallels were eerily similar. For all his power, he'd be damned if he let a little girl go hungry. Just as he was about to dispel her illusion and invite the girl in for some hot ramen, his tenants acted on his behalf. Emerald was a street urchin for as long as she could remember. She didn't have anyone to rely on but herself. The slums of Vacuo were no place for the weak, and she had to fight for every scrap of food she found. It helped that her semblance allowed for her to trick people into liberating their belongings and give them to herself. She could trust only herself. No one else. She would only get hurt. But she hadn't eaten in over 3 days, and she was on her last legs. Her last piece of bread was stolen from her by the bigger kids, and she was left with nothing, yet again. So when she saw the small ramen stand where everyone seemed to always be happy, she scowled. How dare they? How dare they smile and be happy while she was starving in the streets? They knew nothing of hardship and strife. All they were good for was looking down on others who were less fortunate than them. She hated it. Hated them. So, she decided to observe the place for a few days, and when the time was right, she would take the food for herself, while these rich people would suffer for once, and see how it feels to be in her shoes. The ramen stand owner was probably corrupt anyway, she reasoned. He had to be. How else could someone keep that idiotic smile in this hellhole of a city? Was he unaware of what was going on around him? How conceited would one have to be to smile and grin in this world? He must have stolen from someone, she mused. He probably cut corners and used cheap ingredients to save a few lean per bowl. He must be serving low-quality meals to customers, and making money off of it. Aha! Got it, so that's why he is always smiling, he is laughing at their foolishness, she thought, her scarred mind coming up with the only explanation she could stomach, as to why this blonde man was always smiling. Well, she would love to see the smile drop off his face when she tricked him and made off with whatever she could carry in her torn pillowcase. So she waited until the shop closed, and went about her master plan. Emerald extended her semblance, like a parasite, seeking to latch on to the blonde's mind. She saw him jerk back, indicating that it worked. Now, to the matter of food. She was cut off from her thoughts, as she was suddenly not outside the shop anymore. Where she ended up could only be described as the underworld. The castle of the Lord of Hell, if you may. The first thing she noticed was that it was hot. Like scorching hot, and the air was heavy with a certain pressure. She needed to get out of here, wherever here was. I need to leave, she thought while panicking. How did I get here anyway? What is this place? Where? Ho? What do we have here? A dark voice boomed, and Emerald froze in place. Slowly, she turned around, but she soon wished she hadn't. Death, that was the only thing running through her mind as she took in the sight before her. In the middle of the room was an ornate throne, which was surprisingly on fire. And sat on the throne, peering at her with blazing crimson eyes, was definitely the scariest being she had seen in her short life. The height of a mountain, towering over her, making her feel like she was but an ant in its presence. 9 tails of the same color as its fur, swaying hypnotically behind its back. All in all, this monster cut quite an imposing figure. Well, brat? Answer me. The voice said, what were you doing casting an illusion on my host? Host? What did it mean by that? And the only one she had cast an illusion on was? Her eyes widened in fear as the being cackled. It was a dark, malicious sound which went perfectly with the twisted smirk on its face. Just when she thought she couldn't be more scared, it continued. You know what happened to the last person who tried what you did? It asked. I ate him. It concluded with the finality of a god. It was then that Emerald finally gave up hope. She was going to die here. There was no escape from this hell. But she would not cry no, she was stronger than that. She would go with her head held high, no matter. Oi furball. Don't scare the poor girl, ya know. Look at her, the poor thing is shaking like a leaf. A voice shouted, and just like that the oppressive feeling vanished. It was instead replaced by a warm, comforting feeling, almost like a fluffy blanket. And for a moment, Emerald almost let her guard down. She turned around yet again and saw the ramen man from before, standing behind her and glaring at the fox. Honestly, he takes it a bit too far sometime. Sorry about that, lil shrimp. The fox has this whole, I am the Lord of Hell, bow before my majesty, phase going on. He comforted, while racing down and ruffling her hair. Reflexively, she swatted his hand away, and went over his words. It was just an act. She wasn't going to die. How did Ramen Man show up anyway? And the most important question of all. What the hell did you call me? She shouted, not understanding the strange language. Naruto blinked. He was sure the girl would break down in fear, but this was what she asked. Seeing no harm, he answered. Lil shrimp. I called you Lil shrimp. I think it fits, ya know? Shaking her head to derail that stupid train of thought, Emerald asked, where am I? How are you here? Who are you? Who is that? What is going on? She was interrupted as Naruto knelt down, his gaze softening as he did so. Sighing lightly, he started. Whoa whoa. Slow down there, Lil shrimp. We have time, ya know. It's okay. You're not in any trouble, he soothed. Where we are, is in my mind. I came here to dispel the illusion you cast on me. This fox is called Kurama, but that's a story for another time, he finished. She was slowly starting to settle down. Just then, the blonde asked the million-dollar question. So, what was the illusion for, Lil shrimp? Don't call me that, she replied heatedly. My name is Emerald. Emerald, she all but shouted. Okay then, M-chan, I'm Naruto, but you didn't answer my question, he said, completely ignoring her scowl at calling her M-chan. she lowly muttered, looking absolutely adorable as she fidgeted under his gaze. Care to repeat that, M-chan? Naruto asked, as he hadn't caught what the girl said. I said I wanted food. I haven't eaten in days and I was hungry. She trailed off, only now realizing the reality of her situation. She was trapped in an unknown place, with the man she intended to steal from. Due to her vacuum upbringing, she asked the only sensible question. You gonna kill me now? She had expected many reactions from the man, from anger, to shock, at such an absurd and brazen question. But what she saw shook her to the core. Empathy and understanding. His eyes did not hold an ounce of pity, as if he knew she would hate it, but complete understanding of her situation and circumstances. She wondered how this smiling buffoon knew her pain, but he answered before her. I see. That was all he said for some time. Just as she was about to explode at him, the scenery changed. She now found herself in front of the ramen shop again, but the buildings around it were different. It didn't look like a city, but almost like a village. The ramen man started, as if reading her mind, my village to be precise, he said. And that, he pointed to a small blonde child in the corner, is me. He finished, while wearing a sad smile. Emerald was about to ask why he was showing her this, when he interrupted. I was about to invite you for a bowl of ramen, Yano, he said, halting her snarky reply by holding up a hand, but I know enough to say that you would not have trusted my word. I know what it feels like to be in your place, but I know you won't believe a single thing I tell you. So, since we're already in my mind, I thought it better to show you, he said, with those damn understanding eyes of his. Allow me to show you why I was genuinely going to invite you for ramen, he completed, and the memory started playing. Emerald watched, first with skepticism, then with shock and finally with realization, as the blonde boy was driven out of every single store he went to. She watched as he skittishly approached the ramen stand, ready to bolt at a moment's notice. She saw the old man inside give the boy a hot bowl of ramen, on the house. And then she understood. The memory ended there, but M remained in place. She had nothing to fear. This man was just like her, but he was offering her food. While she didn't trust the man yet, she would at least eat what he gave her. With a sheepish expression, she said, Please give me some food, sir, I'm really hungry. Her point was made by her growling stomach. Naruto chuckled at her embarrassed blush. Well, come on then, M-chan, let's get you fed. And just like that, they were back outside the shop. She regained her senses to see the man beckoning her inside, and she absolutely blitzed into the shop. She sat on one of the stools, squirming in her seat, while she waited for the food to be done. The smell alone made her mouth water. She could only imagine what the taste was. When was the last time she had eaten a hot meal without looking over her shoulder for thieves? She couldn't remember. Emerald was broken out of her musing when Ramen Man set a bowl of steaming noodles in front of her. She was immediately about to pounce when. Slow down there, M-chan, it's not going anywhere, ya know. Eat slowly, savor the taste, and if you need more, just ask, okay? Naruto said, putting her mind at ease. She nodded tentatively, and put the first bite in her mouth. It was salty, sour, tangy and all kinds of good things mixed together. It was hot and comforting to eat. But most importantly, it was made for her, only for her, with love and care, the first home-cooked meal she had eaten. Unbeknownst to her, a single tear rolled down her eye, which was noticed by Naruto, who was standing away, smiling softly. Emerald ignored her tears as she relished in the comfort this meal provided. She didn't think ramen would taste this good, but she was wrong. Because it was the best thing she had ever eaten in her life. I never thought, after everything I did and all that I went through, that I would end up opening a ramen shop. Were the thoughts of one Naruto Uzumaki as he closed up shop after yet another long day at Ichimaki Ramen. His quaint little shop had gotten more and more famous as the years went by, known for welcoming everyone regardless of their race. It did cause some of the more strict bigots to stay away, and even go so far as to hassle him, but Naruto never did let opinions of others decide what he did. And in his view, this discrimination against fondness was the most stupid thing he had seen, and he had seen some fairly stupid things in his life. At least, when the villagers of Konoha treated him like crap, it was out of fear. Fear of what Kurama was, and fear of being in the vicinity of the Kyuubi, sealed or not. That didn't justify their actions, but at least they had somewhat of a half-decent reason for them. But this? Discriminating against people just because of how they looked, something that was out of their control. Unacceptable. Suffice to say that Naruto had beaten the snot out of some elitists for creating a scene and picking a fight with some of his fondest customers. But other than the occasional scuffle, the shop was mostly peaceful. Even some huntsmen had shown up with their teams a couple of times, saying that the environment was a welcome change from the typical life and death situations they faced. According to Naruto, though, one event was the most important, that truly highlighted his years working at the shop. Papa. He smiled as he heard that familiar chirpy voice, and turned around just in time to see a small green blur barrel into his chest. He gently wrapped his arms around the offender and ruffled her hair. "Ah, there you are. Ready to go, sweetie?" If anyone would have told Naruto 10 years ago that he'd have a daughter by now, he would have laughed in their faces, his memories of the treatment he received in his homeworld fresh in his mind. How was supposed to know that he would finally have a family of his own? But that was precisely what she was. After he'd given her that first bowl of ramen, she had shown up again the next day. Then the day after that. And he always gave her as much ramen as she wanted. Along with other healthy foods, of course. Until one day, in the second week of this routine, she hadn't come back. He had waited till closing and even kept the shop open an hour longer. When she didn't show, he'd gotten worried. Naruto wondered whether he should go and check or leave her be. She only came once a day, so that meant she had something else to eat during the day, right? Right? But however logically he tried to convince himself, he was still Naruto Uzumaki at heart. He loved helping and protecting his precious people, and Little Emerald had fast rocketed to the very top of that list, as he didn't really know many other people in Vacuo. So, he closed up shop and decided to go and check if she was alright, and he was glad he did. Flashback. 6 months ago Naruto didn't just want to speed around the city looking for her, so he got into a meditative position and stilled. A few seconds later, his eyes gained an orange pigmentation, a sign of his use of senjutsu. He put out his feelers and looked for Emerald. He always found her by the color of her aura, which was, ironically, green. He located her quite quickly, about a mile away from himself, in the poorer part of town. He released his senjutsu and concentrated on the Hiraishin seal he had placed on her hand. He had given it to her and instructed her to channel some aura into it if she were ever in danger. But Emerald was Emerald, and Naruto knew that she was too prideful to ask him for help, even if she trusted him not to hurt her anymore. So, without wasting any more time, Naruto vanished in an orange flash, his own variation of the technique created by his father. When he arrived, the sight made his blood boil. Emerald looked alright, but she was hunched over next to a dumpster, curled up into a ball and crying softly. Honestly, the only reason he hadn't outright adopted the little munchkin was that she had refused, saying that she didn't need anybody to help her. Well, a fat lot of good that did, he mused. Getting even closer and crouching next to her, he reached out to touch her shoulder. Just had he made contact, she flinched violently, and stared at him with wide, unfocused and teary eyes. She tried to get away, but she was already in a corner, so she curled up into herself even more than before. Naruto picked up her faint mutterings due to his highly trained ears. "I don't have anything left to take, please please please." Naruto's heart shattered into pieces as he heard her broken rambling, and he started having flashbacks of his own past. A faint pulse of soothing of chakra from his tenants snapped him out of his thoughts, and he mentally thanked them. "She doesn't recognize who I am, she's retreated into herself. Okay, enough is enough, I'm taking her with me if it's the last thing I do." Naruto knew that there was only one way of making her realize who he was and that he meant no harm. Closing his eyes, he was bathed in the familiar golden cloak of his Ashura form. His warm and comforting presence exuded outwards, calming the environment and making the trees in the area gain a bit more liveliness and color. It had an effect on Emerald as well. Her sobs were lessening, and she was starting to calm down. Reaching down, he gently patted her head. She flinched again but slowly looked up as if instinctively recognizing him. Red eyes regarded him for a brief moment, and her voice followed in a meek whimper. "Mr. Naruto." The hope in her eyes made his heart break all over again, which led him to a series of questions. What happened to her? Why didn't she call him? Why was she crying? But now was not the time, he had a child to comfort. He raised 2 fingers in front of her face. "Yes, it's me, M-chan. Can you hear me? How many fingers am I holding up?" he asked in a soft voice. From his days as a shinobi, he knew the way to snap someone out of a panic attack was to ask random questions in quick succession. It seemed to be working, as Emerald's breathing was calming some more. She shook her head and squinted a bit before replying in a small voice. 2. "Yes, I heard you, Mr. Naruto. What are you doing here? You didn't show up for dinner, so I got worried. You would never have called me if it were up to you, so I came to check myself." The blonde leveled her with a stern glare, and clearly I was right, he admonished. Emerald seemed to shrink further in on herself, which made his eyes soften a tad. He was still mad at her for worrying him, though, but he would argue with her when she was feeling better. "Sorry, Mr. Naruto, but I didn't want to trouble you. You already do so much for me, and I didn't want to burden you more," she murmured. Sighing in exasperation, Naruto reached down and started stroking her scalp. She snuggled up into his side and leaned into his hand and closed her eyes in exhaustion. Naruto wanted to make sure Emerald knew exactly how much she meant to him before he took her in for good. You silly girl, of course, I would worry about you. He soothed while continuing his ministrations. You are the most precious person in my life, M-chan. I have no one else but you. She looked up at him, and he continued, I know I just met you a few weeks ago, but I feel a kinship towards you, ya know. Emerald looked at him, she looked long and hard. She scanned his face, his eyes, his soul, for any sign of deceit. After finding none, the girl looked down. The walls she had built up around her fragile heart for years of loneliness came crashing down around her. Em teared up, before hiccuping and smashing her face into his side. She started shaking, and Naruto realized that she was sobbing again. He gently embraced her and rubbed her back soothingly, all the while comforting her by whispering sweet nothings into her ear. After about 5 minutes, she calmed down enough to speak again. She mumbled into his side. Gently pulling her away from himself and facing her, he asked, Can you repeat that for me, M-chan? She looked away as if thinking over his offer. She was fighting a war with herself. Her years of growing up alone had taught her one thing. That she could trust no one. The moment she let her guard down, someone would stab her in the back, and steal whatever food and possessions she had on her. Hell, she had done it herself many times. So by all accounts, she shouldn't trust this man. Surely he was waiting to strike the moment she started to trust him, just to prove that all people were evil, that his daily ramen treat was just a trap. A trap to bring her hopes up and watch sadistically as they all came crashing down. Then why? Why did she trust him? Could she even trust him? She thought. He hadn't led her astray yet, and no one had waited this long to betray her before. But he will, a malicious voice whispered in her head, everyone always does. No one cares about you, he has to have some sick plan in his head. Yes. There had to be something, she reasoned. She just couldn't wrap her tiny little head around the fact that Naruto, anyone, could be nice to her just for the sake of being nice. With new defiance and denial in her eyes, she glared weakly at him. Why do you care so much? Her voice began in a whisper, but gradually turned into a shout. What's in it for you? No one is nice to me. No one cares about me. But you seem to. You gave me food, this dress and even some money. What do you want from me? She finished, with all her emotion in that last shout. She was crying openly again now. Naruto, to his credit, took the outburst with a calm face. He could relate so much to this girl that it was frightening. He looked at her with a gaze of complete understanding. Is this what I would have turned into if I didn't have the old man Hokage? He thought inwardly. He realized that the girl was lying to herself. She wouldn't listen to reason as she was right now, and if he just took her with him despite her complaints, it would accomplish nothing. She'd just run away at the first chance she got. So he decided not to use any words at all. It was time to try out if his ancestor Hagoromo and Sensei Jiraiya were really right in their worldview. It was time to use the most prominent power he had, the ability to connect hearts and minds, the power of complete understanding among two people. The power of Ninshu. This was a massive step for him, he mused. Ninshu was a soul bond of the highest, most profound level. It bared your entire being to the other person and connected you at your core. It required a lot of trust in each other. He wasn't going to go around giving people chakra, but even then he was hesitant to form such a close bond with someone. Reluctant to form bonds again, afraid of what people would think of him. But looking at the angry crying girl sitting in his lap, he made his choice. She needed this. He needed this. This would do them good. For her to trust him, he had to do the same for her. They both needed someone to accept them wholeheartedly, flaws and all. Trust was a two-way street, after all. Wordlessly, he raised his fist and held it out to Emerald. The fact that she didn't recoil at the action gave him a measure of satisfaction. She looked at the outstretched hand quizzically, not knowing what to do. Naruto looked at her. His fist. Her hand. Back at her. He wiggled his fist, all the while remaining silent. A look of realization dawned in those teary red eyes. Naruto wanted to bump fists, she thought. She couldn't understand why but raised her own fist to meet his anyway. Just to prove herself right, she defended. Any moment now, he would catch her fist and turn on her, any moment. Expecting the worst, she bumped his fist with her own tiny hand. And then she understood. Understood everything. Everything about Naruto, from his birth to his departure from his homeworld and his arrival on Remnant. She never would have believed him if he'd told her straight up. And somehow she knew that he understood her as well. She was speechless, as words were not necessary for their conversation. Retracting his fist from hers, Naruto moved over and picked up the frail girl in his arms. Let's go, M-chan, I'll take care of you. M could only nod, silently hoping that her life would take a turn for the better. Only time would tell how right she was. It was another new day at Ichimaki Ramen, and Naruto was just getting ready to open up shop. The sun was just rising, and Naruto liked to open up the shop early so that people could enjoy their breakfast in peace. He smiled as he looked at the sign of his shop. He would never have imagined that he would end up becoming anything other than Hokage, but he supposed it was all for the best. If he hadn't gone through all the stuff he did and ended up in Remnant, he wouldn't have met his daughter, after all. He loved his daughter more than anything else in his life, along with the bijou. Said daughter was currently bouncing on his shoulders while he was trying to open up the shutter of his shop. Smiling softly at the squirming girl, he tilted his head upwards, and blue eyes met red. M stopped her bouncing and looked at him intently with her doe-like eyes, her own head cocked towards the left. She looked like a kitten, an incredibly adorable kitten. Rolling his eyes at his daughter's antics, he decided to indulge her. "Yes, M-chan? Papa, what ya doin'?" she asked cutely. Chuckling in amusement, Naruto replied, "Well, M-chan, I'm just checking the newspaper." He pointed towards the shutter. "Look, there's the weather section," he said, gesturing towards the shop logo. M puffed her cheeks out and glared at him, but it had the opposite effect of making her even cuter. Meanie. Naruto stood up and pried the tiny girl off his shoulders, much to her dismay. He set her down beside him and bent down to unlock the latch of the shutter. "What did you expect, M, when you asked such an obvious question?" he said with a teasing glint to his eyes, looking down at the embarrassed girl. Even now, he was amazed at the size difference between them. She was just a bit taller than his knees, and she was much frailer and thinner than he was. However, the last part was changing since she was under his care. Deciding that he had teased the little girl enough, Naruto gathered M into his arms and made his way into the shop. There was no one else in the shop, and there would be no one arriving anytime soon. Why waste time and money hiring employees when you can use transformed Cage Bunshin to do the same work for free? He set Emerald down on the counter and thought out the name of the jutsu. Cage Bunshin. Henge. This was another advantage that Naruto gained due to his immense chakra and experience. He no longer required hand seals or speaking out the name of a jutsu to successfully perform it. It was a huge blessing, in his opinion. Instantly, two clones transformed into Tuchi and Ayame appeared into existence. Naruto relayed their orders via telepathy, and they nodded before setting up shop for the day. "Uwa," he heard M's odd voice in the background. Even after 1 year of living with him, she still got impressed whenever he used one of his techniques. That had been one long conversation, he thought, remembering the day after he had rescued M off the streets. Seeing no point in hiding when they had already bonded via ninchu, he told her of his past, though she already had a general idea of it. She had hugged him in an effort to comfort him, which had honestly surprised him at the time. He chalked it up to the power of their bond. He had even introduced her to the bijou, and they had quickly begun to take a liking to the little munchkin. It took some time, but they had warmed up to her, considering her a granddaughter of sorts. He glanced at his odd daughter and ruffled her hair lovingly. Where a year ago she would have violently lashed out, now she simply preened and leaned into his palm. That was another change he had seen in the girl, Naruto mused. When he had brought her home and fed her again, she was noticeably more mellow than their regular encounters would have her be. When he had asked her about this, she had simply said, "I trust you, Papa." Critical damage, was what he thought after hearing that simple declaration. Naruto theorized that M might have gained an insight into him as a person, and saw that she didn't need to act tough around him all the time. That she didn't need to have her defenses up near him, that she could let him inside her heart, and that is what she did. The change in her personality might seem sudden to some, but Naruto knew that her angry attitude was just a defense mechanism. It was just like the idiot mask Naruto had adopted in Konoha. If there had been someone in Konoha who was already being good to him, had rescued him from certain death and then proceeded to form a freaking spiritual soul bond with him, Naruto himself would have dropped his mask around that person. Even he didn't know the full intricacies of ninchu, and he didn't want to find out. Of course, M acted like this only around him. She was still snarky and distrustful of anyone that wasn't Naruto, which is why she stayed in the back during shop times, and she was extremely possessive of him. And she also started calling him Papa, much to his delight. Flashback. "You took care of me, fed me and took me in when no one else would. I've always heard that other papas do the same, so you're Papa," she said and nodded in victory. Naruto was looking at her with wide eyes, not believing that he had someone wanting to stay with him after his decades of loneliness. M was having an internal debate. Then her entire demeanor had changed. She looked away, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She was fidgeting in her seat, suddenly appearing nervous. She had looked at him, with those puppy eyes of hers, and asked in her most timid voice. Unless you don't want me?" she asked, while barely holding back her tears. Naruto had not moved so fast even when he fought Kaguya. Before the girl could blink, she found herself wrapped in a warm hug. Naruto stroked her hair gently and said, "Sure, M-chan, I'll be your papa." He watched as she relaxed in his arms before she started sobbing. "Please don't leave me, Papa, I don't want to go back to those streets. Please let me stay with you, please Papa," she was wailing by now. He comforted her, rubbing her back in a slow, soothing manner. In this kind of situation, there was only one thing he could say. "I won't let anyone hurt you, M-chan, it's a promise of a lifetime." Flashback end. After they had their moment, Naruto and Emerald were closer than ever. He also found that their bond gave M a basic understanding of his language. She could not speak complicated words as of yet but could understand when he did. This helped them both immensely in communication. Since M had nowhere else to go, Naruto had taken her in. She was currently 7 years old and was pretty far behind in her education. He had a clone teacher in their spare time, as well as giving her some books to read. M had reasonably caught up in the year she was with him, and she could read and write fluently. As the schooling took place during the day, Naruto often brought her with him to the shop where she would study in the back. Which is what he was trying to get her to do now, but the clever little thing kept slipping out of his hold. Deciding to adopt a different approach, he placed her on a chair and spoke. "M-chan, you need to study or else you'll never be able to find a job." Glaring in defiance at being told to study, M puffed her cheeks out and replied. "But Papa, I can just work in the shop when I grow up, so I can be with Papa, yay." "No, yay. You need to study and get a proper education. Many children don't have this chance, M. You know that, right?" Naruto chided gently. The girl sobered up at this thought. Of course, she knew. How could she not? She was one of those kids, after all. If her papa hadn't found her that fateful night, who knows what might have happened to her? Her father had made an excellent point. She couldn't forget her roots, and she would work hard for what she earned. She would be someone her father could proudly call his daughter. Her eyes gained a fierce determination, and she nodded. "I know, Papa. I'll be good." Emerald remembered the day after she had been taken in by her father, the day she asked him to help her become strong. She wanted to learn to fight like her papa, so that she would never be weak again. So, she had mustered up all the courage she had and asked him to train her. She had seen his cool techniques when he'd rescued her, and wanted to learn them all so she could be the strongest. The world obeyed the strong, after all. She had been weak once, and she hated it. The crippling fear that even what little she had might get taken away was too daunting for her at times. She had her papa, but he wouldn't always be here. She needed to get stronger, so that everyone would obey her. Fully confident in her ideals, she had approached Papa and told him as such. Asked him to train her, so that she could be the best. His response had been simple, but it shattered all her preconceptions about strength and weakness. Flashback. "If we go by that logic, M-chan, I had no reason to take you in, did I?" Naruto asked gently. "Mere physical strength does not make someone strong, M. It is what you choose to do with your strength that defines you." He looked at her pointedly, and he could tell that she didn't understand. "Let me tell you something I live by, Emerald. The strong protect the weak, not exploit them, and true strength comes from protecting that which is precious to you." M nodded, still trying to comprehend the meaning behind his words. This went against everything she believed in. The strong protected the weak. Then why had no one protected her? Where were the strong ones when she was starving in the streets? She put those angry thoughts aside, instead focusing on the man before her. He was strong, that much she knew. That also meant he was right. Emerald also knew that Naruto was a good person. She understood that much about him from their bond. The bond made her implicitly trust him. All her walls came down crashing around him. But she didn't mind. If this was the way to become strong, she would take it. So she agreed. "Okay, Mr. Naruto, I'll do as you say. Now will you please train me?" Naruto looked at her. He looked long and hard, as if searching for any deceit. He apparently found none, as he nodded. "Sure, M, I'll train you. But first, we have to build up your body. That means a healthy diet and regular exercise, to increase resistance and stamina." He lectured her like a teacher, and after that happens, I'll train you. He trailed off, chuckling menacingly to himself. And M didn't much like his tone at the last part of the sentence. Were his eyes gleaming? Flashback end. From that day, she had been started on a regime of simple exercises, a morning run and a healthy diet. She had complained about vegetables, but Papa would hear none of it. It was working, as she was becoming healthier and reaching the height meant for her age. She would be starting real training soon, and she couldn't wait. She was currently focusing on her education, speaking of which. Naruto nodded in happiness at his daughter. "That's my girl. I'm proud of you." Emerald beamed at the praise, before skittering inside to study with a clone. It was only a matter of time before she went to an academy to become a huntress. She wanted to fight the Grim and make sure orphans like her didn't have to suffer again. An admirable goal in Naruto's opinion, and he would support her every step of the way. Come to think of it, I should start looking for new places to move. Vacuo isn't exactly the best place to be raising a child, and she'll need to go to school soon. Filing that thought away for later, Naruto went to work preparing for his first customers. It was around lunchtime when the restaurant got busy. Many folks from all around the city came to enjoy a pleasant meal at the establishment. But, due to the racism present in the world, some conflicts were bound to happen. Like one was happening right now. "Get out of my way, filthy animal!" An angry voice shouted and caught Naruto's attention. Wiping off his hands, he went outside to investigate. Since all the waiters were reinforced clones, he wouldn't have to worry about the stand being destroyed. He made his way to the main sitting area and found that a burly man, probably the one who shouted earlier, was staring down a faunus woman, and they both were glaring at each other. The man's eyes were bloodshot, denoting that he was intoxicated. "Great, just what I need. A drunk bigot," Naruto thought in frustration. He just couldn't have a day without any incidents. "Can't ya hear me even with those big-ass ears?" the goon yelled at the lady. "Why they let you out in the world is beyond me. Your kind should be kept in zoos. Dirty pests." The man sneered, and the lady, who appeared to be a dog faunus, was getting a few angry tears in her eyes. "This is a faunus-friendly place for your information," she retorted. "Read the sign outside, you bigoted idiot." The woman's logic made the man even angrier. "What do you know about signs? Can you even read?" he snarled. "As I said, get out of my sight. Can't you see I want to eat, stupid bitch?" His last comment brought about gasps from the various customers, both human and faunus. While calling a human a bitch was insulting, calling a faunus any kind of animal-related insult was considered very offensive. And this man had just called a female dog faunus a bitch. It was a very scandalous remark, at least by faunus standards. The man continued. "Do you know who I am, animal? I am Franklin Winchester, the head of the Winchester family." This declaration brought about reactions of surprise from the onlookers. The Winchesters were a very prominent family, and one of the most elitist and snobbish. However, the fact remained that they had a lot of power, political or otherwise. People generally avoided them due to their status, and the family was known to have a hatred for faunus. And this woman was his target. "I just wanted some food after a long mission, and the only place that was relatively clean was this shitty ramen stand," he yelled. "Who even likes these piss-poor noodles anyway?" Naruto stiffened at this. "Oh, he's gone. Hehehehe." Shukaku's slightly mad voice cackled in his mind. Naruto nodded in agreement. The discrimination was already over the line, but to insult ramen, unforgivable. "Oh yes, he's toast." Naruto agreed. "I'm going to completely and systematically destroy this man." Unaware of this inner monologue, Franklin continued to dig his own grave. "This place isn't worthy of his presence. It's not even professional here. It's a fucking mess," he shouted, clearly not in his right mind. "I saw a little girl running around inside earlier today. Who even keeps kids if they aren't of any use? Just chuck the girl out on the street and be done with it." One Jinchuriki and 9 Biju were restraining themselves from ripping this idiot to shreds. If there were two things you didn't do in front of Naruto, it was insulting ramen or his family. This fool had done both in quick succession. It was then that Naruto decided to be extra sadistic in dealing with this man. Earlier he was just planning on beating the crap out of Franklin, but now that wouldn't be enough. It was time to let out the prankster king of hell. Though the prank would be more like bringing the idiot's whole life crashing down around him. "Naruto, please deal with this man." Matabi purred in his mind. She, along with Kakuo, had taken an express liking to Emerald, and this idiot needed to pay. "I will, but I can't kill him. It'd attract too much attention if such a powerful man ended up dead inside my stand." Naruto then grinned maliciously. "But don't worry, I have just the thing." Meanwhile, in the real world, Winchester was sparing no expense in berating the faunus, insulting every part of her character and being. The slurs seemed to have their desired effect, as the faunus woman was almost reduced to tears. Naruto could sympathize with her, though he probably had it worse than the woman did. The man, however, was not deterred. Seeing as the shocked woman wanted to move out of his path, he raised his hand to strike her. The crowd watched with disgust, but no one had the guts to step in. The man's hand descended, but it never hit the woman. The Winchester wondered what had stopped his hand from striking the bitch, when he saw the shop's owner gripping his wrist tightly. The man tried to wrest his hand free, but the blonde had an iron grip. Being as drunk as he was, the man didn't fully comprehend the situation and tried to strike the owner with his other arm. But to the surprise of the other customers, he suddenly froze in place. What had happened was that the drunk had made the mistake of looking into Naruto's eyes. He could have sworn that those icy blue eyes flashed red for a moment. Just before his hand struck, he heard a faint whisper. "Genjutsu. Sharingan." The man suddenly lost all force in his attacks, stood up straight, and turned towards the faunus woman, who flinched at his gaze. He bowed down at his waist, and spoke in a loud voice. "Everyone, please record this on your scrolls. I would like to issue a formal apology in the name of the Winchester family." The bystanders were dumbfounded and did just that. The whole spectacle had attracted a lot of attention, and people outside the stand were crowding around to watch. They all wanted to see what would happen next. In a corner, Naruto's eyes twinkled with sadistic glee. Seeing as everyone was recording him, Franklin continued. "I would like to humbly apologize to," he trailed off, looking at the dog faunus woman he was insulting. "Ah, Amy," the woman squeaked out. Clearing his throat, he continued, "Yes, Ms. Amy. In the name of the Winchester family, I would like to apologize for being a colossal asshole. I am very drunk, but still very much an asshole." The crowd watched with wide eyes, Amy included, as the man admitted to his faults. But he wasn't finished, not by a long shot. "I am a small, weak little man who likes to belittle others for my own amusement. Our entire family is like that, actually. My wife is a haughty snob, and my son Cardin is an arrogant little brat. We hate faunus and regularly oppress them for fun." The crowd's eyes were bugging out of their sockets. Just what the hell was happening? "The majority of our estate has been stolen from faunus farmers who we coerced into giving us their land," Franklin said. "We don't pay the servants at our estate, and we have committed numerous frauds and crimes. There is a ledger in my study in our mansion, which details all of my transgressions. I am fed up of being a stupid elitist bastard, and so I am confessing to my crimes. I implore the police to seize all of our assets even though there is no evidence of them being illegal. I can assure you that they are all stolen. I just covered my tracks well. I hope to go to jail like the worthless piece of crap I am." Silence. Total silence followed the man's confession, which was just recorded by over 100 separate scrolls. Franklin didn't even look back, he just walked away. The very next day, a massive scandal would erupt, which would result in the disgrace of the Winchester house. The man would go to jail, whereas his wife and child would be forced to live in an apartment with what little they had left. "That's what you get for insulting both Ramen and M, ya bastard," Naruto thought in glee. Naruto had merely made the man confess to all his crimes, albeit suddenly. The man ruined himself without any extra effort on Naruto's part. "Naruto, that was diabolical. Well done," Kurama complimented from within his mind. Naruto nodded in satisfaction, as the crowd cleared out. The lady, Amy, stood there for a little longer with a shocked expression. Eventually, she too paid for her meal and left. Seeing as it was still about 3 in the afternoon, Naruto decided to go and check on Emerald. Making a clone to finish preparing the order, he went inside. He looked on with a barely concealed deadpan as the scene played out before him. There was his clone, somehow wearing glasses, and with a wooden pointer in hand, pointing at a blackboard. On the other side of the room was his little girl, and she had on the cutest focused expression he had ever seen. Hi, who can tell me what sound a sloth makes?" the clone asked, teaching Emerald various animals and their calls. "What else would you teach a 7-year-old girl?" "Ooh, me, M declared, raising her small hand up and bouncing in place. The clone seemed to think about who to ask. Among the many students in his class, eventually, his gaze settled on M. How about M-chan?" the clone finished, pointing to the little girl. M perked up, and just as she was about to answer, she stopped. "What sound does a sloth make anyway?" she asked while tilting her head, her previous enthusiasm replaced with curiosity. The clone put a finger on his chin and seemed to ponder the question, but eventually gave up and shrugged. At this point, Naruto decided to interject. "What's happening here?" No sooner had he spoken those words than a green bullet tackled him. "Papa!" M squealed happily. Naruto hugged her back, smiling softly down at her. "How's it going, M? What did you learn today?" Emerald mulled over it, deciding how to answer. "I learned to count to 1,000, and also, animal sounds," she exclaimed excitedly. He was glad the clones could teach adequately. "Well, keep it up, Emerald, and I'll give you a surprise later today, okay?" "Yay, Papa's the best. Oof, my aging heart," thought Naruto as he was once again overcome by the sheer mo that was his little girl. Naruto patted her head softly, which earned him a pleased hum from the girl. "I'll leave you to it then, be good, ya hear?" "Yes, Papa," chuckling to himself, Naruto went back to his kitchen. He started working on the next order, but then he felt something which made him freeze in his tracks. It was an old Hiraishin marker, one he gave out 2 years ago, and he remembered very clearly to whom he had given it. Summer-chan. He thought in worry, recalling the bubbly girl from 2 years ago. She's in trouble. I must go quickly, and with that thought, Naruto created a clone for M and vanished in a flash of orange. Naruto was reading the latest news on his scroll while sitting in the cashier's portion of the shop. It was a relatively lax day, as it was the middle of the week. It was also about 3 in the afternoon, so the lunch rush had just subsided. So having nothing better to do, he got out his scroll and scrolled through the news. He was still amazed by the technology of this world. It was so much more advanced than the elemental nations. While his homeworld had laptops and TVs by the time he left, this portable handheld device was on a whole new level. The applications were limitless, and one could access anything from news to games, or even music. Granted, the people of this world might have had to evolve faster due to the lack of chakra to defend themselves, he mused. He wondered if he should introduce chakra into this world. Naruto knew that this world didn't need it, but what if he found deserving? Absolutely not, idiot. Oh no, you don't screw up like the old man, Naruto. Rejected, kitten. As much as I would like new humans to kill, it's a big risk, hehehe. Please don't, I just want to sleep peacefully. No, Naruto. We don't trust anyone else with chakra. If you do that, I'll start freestyling, and I won't ever stop. I also vote no. Well, that's that, Naruto thought. Alright guys, I won't give anyone else chakra. Naruto assured them, this world has no place for it, it will do more harm than good. Getting grumbles of agreement, Naruto resumed his news reading. It was really nothing new, Faunus writes, grim attack, dust shortage, same old. But this was precisely what he wanted after all. A place where he could normally live, without any stigma or prejudice against him. The bell of the shop rang, signifying the entry of a customer. Naruto looked up to see 3 people, and he could immediately tell that they were Huntsmen, due to the massive weapon one of them was carrying. As a shinobi with decades of experience, he instantly analyzed them for potential threats. The first one to enter was a man. He had graying black, spiky hair, vermilion eyes, and slight stubble along his jawline. Along with a red, tattered cloak, he wore a gray dress shirt, black dress pants and black dress shoes. He had what looked like a greatsword slung on his back, but Naruto couldn't be sure. Any weapon could look like anything in this world. Naruto's skilled senses also caught a strong smell of alcohol and lots of negative emotions from the man. Naruto generally kept that ability of his deactivated, as he considered it a violation of privacy if it wasn't necessary, or an emergency. But even then, some things and feelings got through to him. So even though Naruto couldn't tell exactly what emotions the man had, Naruto could confirm that he had some, at least. Great, another drunk. Naruto thought in defeat, I'm going to kick his ass if he becomes a bother. The second person was a woman. She had shoulder-length black-red hair and wore a hooded cloak which was white outside and red underneath. Nothing else was visible due to the cover. She looked like a carefree person and did not give off as many negative emotions as the drunk did. The third person was also a woman, but she caught Naruto's interest, mainly due to her appearance, which was quite beautiful. He might add she had very light blonde hair tied back in a bun. Her eyes were bright green, and she wore glasses. She wore a white top and a black high-waisted pencil skirt with black boots. Ooh, the kitten has a crush, Matabi teased, in line with her cat-like personality. She probably had a similar grin, too. Her statement brought chuckles from the other Biju. If he were any younger, Naruto would have blushed. But he had decades of experience with teasing and women alike, being Jiraiya's apprentice. Good for you, Naruto, it's about time you found someone to love. Chome began, a little somberly, and in this world, no one will care about you being a Jinchuriki. There's not enough history with us here. Yes, at the most, you'll be treated with respect for your power, not baseless hatred like before. Isobu added his to Ryo. I know guys, and I agree. But it'll take some time, ya know? Naruto said, a touch sadly. He was still hesitant to let people close to him. After facing so much hatred and scorn, if the person he loved ended up hating or fearing him, Naruto didn't know what he'd do. There was always the question of his immortality as well, but that was easily fixed. He could simply move the Biju to a dimension of his creation and fade away himself. He wasn't concerned about outliving his loved ones, but with getting loved ones in the first place. The Biju had tried to convince him to settle down, both in Remnant as well as the elemental nations. But Naruto was too afraid to trust anyone again. Naruto shook himself out of his sad thoughts when he realized that the pretty blonde woman was waving to him with a slightly annoyed expression. Yes ma'am, how may I help you? The woman sniffed, seemingly displeased with his late response. She then spoke. I was asking if you had a table for 3? Naruto raised an eyebrow at the tone she used. While not sounding rude, it was like she was correcting the behavior of a child. She was standing straight, her features schooled in a mask of indifference. The other two were nonplussed as if used to this behavior already. He guessed that she was a strict kind of person. Naruto, being Naruto, decided to tease her a bit. "Aw, sorry, I was so enthralled by your beauty that I wasn't paying attention, he said while grinning and rubbing the back of his head, not ashamed at all. The very instant he said that, the drunk behind the blonde woman burst into laughter, along with the other lady, who was giggling. "Oh man, you must have balls of steel," the drunk roared, still cackling madly. The cloaked girl started giggling harder. But the most interesting reaction was from the lady herself. Her face had turned a slight tinge of red, and her eyes were wide. She was blushing, could be either in anger or embarrassment. She seemed to take a moment until his words registered, and then, "WHWH, what an uncouth remark," she exclaimed, a tad loudly for an indoor environment. "How can you say something so rude to someone you just met?" "How can I? Whatever do you mean?" Naruto continued, mirth glinting in his eyes. "Is it a crime to appreciate sheer radiance when I see it?" he asked, feigning ignorance. The woman was turning redder by the minute, so Naruto decided to end it there before she exploded and someone got injured. He wasn't kidding about her beauty, though, so he wasn't about to apologize for it. "Anyway, to answer your question," he clapped his hands, snapping the woman out of her embarrassed state. "I do have a table for you if you would kindly follow me," he said, moving towards an empty table. He beckoned to them to have a seat, which they did. All the while, the drunk was howling with laughter. So was the cloaked lady, but her giggling was a bit more subdued. It was a good thing these were the only customers he had, or else there would be a nuisance. Just as the pretty woman was about to take a seat, Naruto pulled out her chair for her, bowing slightly. "Milady," he said, failing to hide an amused smile. He was expecting another outburst, but he got something else entirely. With what he knew so far about this woman, she seemed uptight and strict, and a bit prudish. Naruto never believed in first impressions all that much, but he knew next to nothing about the lady. He wanted to get to know her, hence his advances. But the outburst never came. What he got was something entirely different. The woman simply nodded and smiled beautifully. "Such a gentleman, thank you," and then she seated herself. The drunk fell off his chair, and the cloaked woman stopped giggling to stare in shock at the pretty lady. Said woman was meanwhile glancing through the menu as if nothing happened. Noticing the silence, she looked up and asked, "What?" The drunk had gotten up by then, his face taking on an incredulous look. Pointing accusingly at the pretty lady, he began. "What the hell was that?" he asked, baffled. "I thought that you would send him through the window for his comments and you're thanking him." The drunk was acting weird, making Naruto wonder exactly how drunk he was. The woman replied, "Well, Kirao, you obviously know precious little about me. This good man here at least had the manners to pull my seat for me, as chivalry demands." She spoke in a haughty tone, thanking him as only right, after all. The now named Kirao didn't back down, but what about his flirting earlier? The woman looked at the menu, suddenly finding it very interesting. It wasn't, in all fairness, that much of an unwelcome change. That's just a roundabout way of saying you liked it. And why is it so baffling if it did? The woman challenged. "A proper lady likes to be appreciated, Kirao. Not that you would know anything about being proper, that is," she sniffed. At this point, the cloak lady interjected. She had been looking oddly shocked as well, leading Naruto to believe that the blonde woman did not usually behave like this. She peeked her head out of her cloak and spoke. "But Glinda, you never talk to guys in such a manner, and I thought that you hated flirting because it's uncultured or something, and also." The woman was cut off by Naruto, as she was going into a rant. Naruto was just as stumped, so he asked as such. "I think what she means is that your earlier reaction was much different from this one." The woman, Glinda, averted her eyes at that. She seemed to take the time to think up a response. "I apologize for my earlier outburst, I was flustered," she admitted, still looking away. "I did not know the proper decorum with which to respond." She finished, and to Naruto, she seemed almost shy. He would probably get clobbered if he mentioned it, though. "Not used to it?" Naruto asked, honestly confused. "Are the men around here stupid or blind or something?" He tilted his head, all signs of teasing gone. The implications of this statement were not lost on the three. Glinda smiled and blushed prettily as if pleased to be complimented again. Kirao was looking close to collapsing in shock, while the cloaked lady was just as stricken. "Why, thank you for your kind words, Mr. Glinda said, looking to Naruto expectantly. Naruto Uzumaki. Pleased to meet you." Extending a hand to her, he was happy when she shook it. "And who might you be?" Glinda gave a demure giggle. My, what a well-mannered man. It's truly a rarity to see someone so well-behaved nowadays," she finished, still giggling. Naruto grinned at that. "Well, I can be pretty gentlemanly, ya know," he stated, and immediately froze with widened eyes. Now he'd gone ahead and done it. Naruto's verbal tick had slipped out. That was so embarrassing while talking to a woman. As if on cue, the entire table burst into laughter. Naruto actually blushed, further increasing their guffaws. Even Glinda was snickering in amusement. Eventually, they calmed down and introduced themselves. I'm Kirao Bronwyn. Nice to meet ya. Kirao greeted with a lazy wave, more out of obligation than interest. I'm Summer Rose, his teammate, the cloaked lady said boisterously. Naruto chuckled at her enthusiasm. And I'm Glinda Goodwitch, a pleasure to meet you. Glinda finished, with a friendly smile, which Naruto couldn't help but reciprocate. Well, it's nice to meet you all, what would you like to have? Naruto said, with his pad in his hand. He took their orders and went to get them filled. Throughout their meal, he engaged in conversation with the trio. He discovered that they were ex-students of Beacon Academy, which was a prestigious school in Remnant. They had graduated a year ago and were on some mission, which Naruto didn't ask about. The three seemed to be in their early 20s. Soon, their meal came to an end, and all of them were sitting and chatting. Since the trio were the only customers in the shop, they had established a rapport with Naruto. He also gave them a free dessert each so that they could sit and talk. Summer opted for cookies, while Glinda chose tea. Kirao asked for alcohol but was promptly refused. After the meal, they were sitting in a companionable silence, which was broken by Naruto. So, Glinda, can I have your scroll number? I would like to be friends, if it's alright with you. Naruto asked, getting straight to the point. He was never one for beating around the bush. Glinda seemed to think it over, but eventually, she smiled and nodded. I would like that, Naruto, you seem like a nice man. Ha! I'll be damned, and of course, Kirao had to interject. If Naruto were honest with himself, he was getting irritated by Kirao's comments about Glinda. She was a delightful and pleasant woman, and there was no need to be mean to her at every possible chance. Before Naruto could wonder where this protectiveness came from, the words had already left his mouth. Yano, you should learn some manners like Glinda says, he said, making the woman turn to him, and I don't appreciate you being so crass to my new friend. Glinda was staring at him in something akin to awe. She never expected the man to stand up for her, instead to ridicule her like most and join in on the joke. She knew that she was a bit stricter than most, but she always tried not to come off as snobbish or rude. However, it still made her the butt of many jokes among her peers. No one saw past the first impression they got of her and got to really know her. But this man, within minutes of meeting her, had blatantly stated that he found her beautiful. Not snobbish, or rude, or prudish, but beautiful. She had been complimented a lot before. She was a good-looking young woman of 23 after all, but hearing it coming so nonchalantly from a male was refreshing. She knew he was joking, but the fact still remained. He'd spoken with them, all the while being the perfect host, and even given them a complimentary dessert and drink each. And he'd called her his friend, after just 2 hours of meeting them. On second thought, he did seem like an outgoing person, she mused, who would make new friends left and right. Still, it was good to find someone who wasn't put off by her strict disposition. She would definitely like to get to know him better. The two tapped their scrolls together, exchanging their information. Great, thanks, Glyn, Naruto exclaimed, grinning cheerfully. Glyn? She asked, raising an eyebrow. You're my friend now, so I'll call you Glyn. I nickname all my friends, Yano, Naruto explained, leaving out the fact that she was currently his only friend. Glinda seemed to think over this information, and she nodded. Very well, I'll allow it. She smiled. Kirao was choking on his spit by now and glared at Naruto. What you mean Blondie, that's how she is, all prim and proper. He slurred. Had he been drinking inside the shop? Still, I would appreciate it if you didn't, and please don't drink in my shop, it's the middle of the day. Naruto said while rubbing the bridge of his nose. Why did he get stuck with all the drunks? His teammate, Summer, looked embarrassed that he was drinking again. Glinda was shooting Kirao a disapproving glare. Unfortunately, this logic seemed to infuriate Kirao even more. He got up from his chair, making Naruto tense in anticipation. If the drunk wanted a fight, he was going to get one. Oh yeah? Kirao drawled. What are y'all gonna do about it, huh? Feed me to death? Kirao. Summer admonished, with Glinda not far behind. Apologize to Mr. Naruto right now. She chided as if berating a child. Naruto idly wondered if she spoke from practice, but let the thought go. She then turned to Naruto. I'm so sorry for my teammates' actions. Mr. Naruto, as the team leader, I will take responsibility, she finished loudly, with determination in her eyes. Naruto smiled at her, as she reminded him of his younger days. It's no problem, Summer, I'm used to drunks and their antics. He slyly looked at Kirao, and don't call me mister, I'm probably as old as you are. Summer lit up in curiosity. Whoa, seriously? We're 23, how old are you? She grinned. It seemed she was opening up a bit more. The same. Not by a long shot, but they didn't need to know that. Hey, don't ignore me. I'm saying some important stuff here, hollered Kirao. Naruto wondered whether he should just kick the guy out, but that would mean Glinda would have to leave. Well, he was itching to punch something anyway. Say, Kirao. Naruto began. How about a spar? He grinned challengingly at the end, making it harder to refuse. The two women were shocked at this turn of events and were going to speak up. Ha! I like you, Blondie, Kirao bellowed. But I'm a huntsman, you see, wouldn't want to kill a civvy accidentally. He said, and the ladies seemed to agree with him, getting visibly relieved expressions. Naruto decided to forego reason and strike at the core, Kirao's ego. I'm sorry, are you named Kirao, or Chicken? He jibed, getting a glare from the man, and besides, I have to defend the lady's honor, don't I? He finished with a mock bow in Glinda's direction. She was not amused. Don't be stupid, Naruto, he might not look it, but Kirao's really skilled. Glinda admonished him, begrudgingly admitting Kirao's skill. Even while he's drunk, he could seriously hurt you, or worse, she finished. Yeah, listen to your girlfriend Blondie, I don't want to hurt ya. You seem like a good guy, so I'll give you a pass this time, he said in a cocky manner. Kirao wasn't some kind of thug, he liked to fight as much as the next guy, but he had his self-control. If he started beating up every civilian who looked at him wrong, he wouldn't be fit to be a huntsman. Glinda looked a bit miffed at the comment, but before she could defend herself, the atmosphere changed. The dining area of the shop suddenly got a lot hotter, and the cozy, homey atmosphere was replaced by something more sinister. Kirao looked at his friends and found that they were breathing heavily. The room was tinted red, and it just seemed wrong. Like there was some danger lurking over their heads, and he couldn't tell or see what it was. And what he couldn't know, he couldn't counter. The air was laden with an oppressive pressure, and Kirao was faintly aware of the sweat gathering on his brow, but he just didn't care. He was ready to attack at a moment's notice, but nothing was attacking him. There was just this uneasy feeling in his gut, but he couldn't find the source. Are you sure about that? Who the hell was that? Kirao, in his intoxicated and wary state of mind, got even more worked up due to the demonic-sounding voice. He looked towards his colleagues, who were just as alert. Then he looked to Naruto. Were his eyes always red? Are you so sure that you'll hurt me? Naruto spoke in that same deep voice of his eyes now crimson and slitted, like a fox's. How can you know till you try? He finished, giving a fanged grin. Just as Kirao was about to attack in a panic, the oppressive presence vanished, and all was right with the world again. Well then, how about that spar? Naruto spoke cheerfully as if nothing had happened. What the hell was that? Surprisingly, it was Glinda who shouted this, breaking her usual personality. I meant, how did you do that? She finished, regaining her composure and adjusting her glasses. Kirao and Summer were eagerly listening in, waiting for his answer. Naruto, for his part, merely tilted his head in confusion. Whatever do you mean? Tell us what the hell that was, Blondie, Kirao yelled. How can a noodle shop owner create such an uneasy atmosphere? It was nothing he couldn't handle, but Kirao was still intrigued by this chef in front of him. But who was it that said I can't fight? Naruto rebutted. You're not the only ones who can, ya know. He finished mysteriously. Where were you trained, if I might ask? Alright Blondie, let's fight. Do you have any cool weapons? One can guess exactly who made which statement. Yes, let's. Naruto pointed to Kirao. I have some weapons, but they're not that cool, he told Summer, who looked disappointed. That's a secret. He pointed at Glinda and winked. Glinda looked like she wanted to probe more, but was again cut off by Kirao's boisterous yell. Let's take this outside, Blondie, I'm going to kick your ass. Oh, how little he knew, and so, the four went to the back of the shop, where there was a small garden made by Naruto. It was a medium-sized space, sufficient for a taijutsu spar. The trio looked around his garden, seemingly appreciating its beauty. Glinda seemed to look at him in a new light, as if she enjoyed seeing this new side of him. She gave him an appreciative once-over. Naruto and Kirao took opposite sides of the yard, and Glinda acted as the referee. Even Summer was visibly excited for the fight, evident by the girl bouncing on her feet. Naruto wondered what possessed him to fight these people. The whole point of changing dimensions was to sit back and relax, and stay out of the spotlight, and he had been doing exactly that for about a year. But Naruto Uzumaki was still a hyperactive shinobi at heart, so he could never sit still for long. And as long as he stuck to taijutsu and revealed nothing, he should be fine. They would just think that he had trained to fight to survive, and that was that. Naruto did not need the extra attention of an entire Huntsman Academy on him, or else they would find out that he was nowhere on the map of the world until about a year ago. He was fairly confident that he could defeat anyone on this planet, as he had yet to sense any power level even remotely close to his. But he had to play it safe, as a shinobi would. That meant no dropping meteorites as a part of a spar. So, when Glinda told them to get their auras linked to the scrolls, he sheepishly said that his aura was not unlocked, and he just fought as is. Glinda immediately chided him for his irresponsibility, and how he could get hurt without an aura. She then offered to unlock his aura. Naruto had to admit, he was intrigued by the offer. Agreeing to her proposal would serve many benefits. Firstly, he would be able to determine if he had an aura in the first place. Secondly, he would get a decent defense and further accelerate his already overpowered healing factor. And finally, it would allow him to fit in, and explain why he wasn't taking as much damage. So, he agreed. Glinda stepped towards him, and placed one hand on his forehead and the other on his chest. She muttered something, in a low voice, almost like a chant, and then Naruto felt it. Since he had a soul, he therefore had an aura. But now that it had been unlocked, he felt like a missing piece of his being had snapped back into place. It was exactly like he had read, his soul given form, and since Naruto had a really pure soul, his aura took a brilliant golden color, not too different from his six-paths sage mode. He felt good, better than he normally felt. Guys, did you know about aura? I feel so complete. Interesting. Kurama piped up, there is no change in your chakra network. It seems that your soul has been given a physical manifestation. The 9 of us will tell you if anything changes in here. Naruto was still reeling from this new information. His soul given form? The whole concept of aura looked to be an elaborate yin release technique, using spiritual energy to create form out of nothing. And since Naruto had a stronger affinity to yang release due to his sun mark, he did not understand the complexities of the former. Regardless, this spectacle had already proven memorable to the hunters and would draw a lot of attention to him if handled incorrectly. If they raised any questions about his unnatural abilities, it was over. The other 3 huntsmen were staring slack-jawed at the sight. They had no words for the sight, but they tried anyway. Kirao was debating whether he should actually go through with this fight, but squashed those doubts a second later. This was just an untrained civilian, after all. "Ooh-ah, awesome," Summer squealed, with stars in her eyes. She was practically bouncing in excitement by now. She likely hadn't seen such an aura before. However, the most surprising reaction came from Glinda. She was staring at Naruto with a critical gaze, as if trying to decipher some puzzle. "Strange." She muttered, "You already had your aura unlocked, but it felt like it was repressed." She paused for a bit, taking the time to properly explain her findings. Being deep in thought, she did not notice Naruto's smile slightly fade. "My theory is that you had subconsciously unlocked your aura after a stressful event, but did not know it at the time. Hence it was repressed." She then leveled Naruto with a flat stare. Which begs the question, what stressful event could you have gone through for this to happen? Throughout her monologue, Naruto had started getting progressively more nervous, while expertly not showing any of his emotions on his face. Then he caught the last part of her sentence. Stressful event, huh? He wondered what event in his life would not be classed as stressful. Lonely childhood, human sacrifice, betrayed and then stabbed through the lung by his best friend, having S-Class Nin hunt him, and the rest of the hot mess that was his life. Naruto was sure that if he were to tell them his tale, the trio would end up traumatized to some extent. But he had no intention of telling his life's story to 3 relative strangers within hours of meeting them, contrary to some stories he had read on his scroll. It wasn't like he was beaten by mobs or tortured on a daily basis or anything, but his childhood was far from happy. Naruto wondered what his childhood would have been like if he had his parents, maybe a sibling. "They would probably forget you exist, in favor of your Jinchuriki sister," Shukaku said, making Naruto pause and the other Biju look at him. "Then you would get treated exactly like you were for holding the soul of Kurama, until you abandoned Konoha and got taken on as an apprentice by a never-seen-before ninja more powerful than the Yondaime." The Tanuki finished, nodding his head sagely. Silence. "That's absurd, Shukaku," Naruto retorted, clearly affronted. "My parents clearly wouldn't, you know what, never mind, we'll talk later." Naruto then cut the link, wanting to forget about this weird conversation. Seeing as Glinda was still waiting for an answer, Naruto went with the safest response he could muster. "Grim. I don't want to say anything more, ya know," he finished, while faking sadness. He hoped they would respect his boundaries and leave him be. This proved true when the hunters nodded in understanding. "I understand. I apologize for bringing up bad memories." Glinda looked repentant, making Naruto feel slightly guilty, "but let us begin with the spar." She finished, getting agreement from those present. "Yes, let's." He smiled, "I have a drunk to thrash." Kirao took offense to that. "What you mean, Blondie? I'm gonna be the one doing the thrashing." I'd like to see you try. Why you? Enough. Glinda interrupted, visibly irritated by now. Be a little mature and settle your differences in the match, she scolded. Yeah. Fight, 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 Summer chimed in, unable to contain her excitement. The two men took opposite sides in the lawn, treating it as a ring. Their aura levels showed up in their respective scrolls, both bars full. Naruto, unsurprisingly, had almost twice as much aura as Kirao did, and did not like it one bit. Having any attribute of his recorded and on display to everyone always made him antsy. The two opponents shook hands before facing off, and none of the hunters noticed a black seal briefly flare into Kirao's palm. 3, 2, 1. Begin! Glinda shouted, and leapt out of the way. Both fighters stood completely still for a few moments, gauging each other for potential threats. Well, Kirao was gauging Naruto for threats, while said blonde simply stood there with his hands in his pockets, looking incredibly disinterested. Kirao, of course, interpreted it as Naruto looking down on him, and rushed the blonde in a burst of speed. Even though his semblance wasn't related to speed, Kirao was still one of the fastest huntsmen in Vale. Which is why he was surprised when his attack hit air. Kirao balked when Naruto suddenly disappeared, and immediately got on guard. If this guy could disappear out of his sight, then he must be incredibly fast. He was given no more time to think, as he reflexively dodged a punch that would have hit him square in the nose. Ducking low to avoid being hit, Kirao was yet again met by a low kick meant to take out his knees from under him. Barely managing to dodge the second blow, Kirao created some distance between them. "Huh. You might just force me to try, Blondie," Kirao declared haughtily, hoping to get a rise out of his opponent. If Naruto took the bait and rushed in angrily, Kirao would win. Any insult to his ego would surely rile up the buffoon. Sorry, you say something?" Naruto replied nonchalantly, his hands in his pockets. "Why you?" Suffice to say, Kirao was the one who got riled up instead. His hurt pride and bruised ego at such a blatant dismissal mixed with his drunk state, and he rushed. Only to find nothing awaiting him. Looking around for Naruto, the hunter found his opponent yet again behind him, but something was different. Because Naruto's hands were out of his pockets, but not to fight. Oh no, the blonde was eating ramen. Miso ramen at that, which was steaming hot, signifying the fact that it was freshly made. "When did y'all even make that?" Kirao crowed indignantly. This shopkeeper was really grating on his nerves. He was not met with a response. The two female spectators had dumbfounded looks on their faces. Summer was jumping up and down at Naruto's speed, being able to dodge Kirao like he did. Glinda, however, was torn. She didn't know whether to be irked at Naruto for not taking the spar seriously, or to be impressed at his speed. This went on for quite a few minutes, Kirao trying to hit Naruto while Naruto simply dodged around the hunter's hits. This was all well and good, but Naruto wanted to finish this before he ended up either killing Kirao or revealing something by accident. It helped that Kirao was not in top shape and getting tired. He could downplay his win as a result of Kirao being drunk. But now, time to end this. Suddenly, Naruto appeared in front of Kirao, grabbing his right arm mid-punch. No one inquired where the ramen went, too invested in the spar. Since Naruto had a vice grip on Kirao's arm, the hunter could do little else than tank the hit he knew was coming. Crack. The hit came with such force that Kirao's aura could barely protect him. It was a brutal punch, delivered directly to the man's solar plexus. Aura groaned and struggled against chakra, and chakra ultimately won. Kirao had the wind knocked out of him and collapsed in a heap. Kirao's aura was dangerously in the red, and Naruto's was full. There was a clear winner. "Victory goes to Naruto," Glinda announced, trying and failing to keep a surprise out of her voice. Even Summer had gone oddly still. Naruto was about to ask if she was okay, when suddenly. "Woo!" Summer exclaimed, bounding over to Naruto and getting in his face. "You were so cool," she fired off. "You were all like wah. Pua. And where did the ramen come from?" And she was cut off by Glinda, who placed a hand on the excitable young woman's shoulder. "What Summer means to say, Naruto, is that we were surprised to see you win," she said, while pushing up her glasses. Kirao is a prominent huntsman, and defeating him is no small feat. She finished with a self-satisfied look on her face. She must be enjoying the sweet retribution, Naruto mused. He was probably drunk, ya know?" Naruto replied, scratching the back of his head, "and I've always been really fast. Nothing special, really." He finished, using a subtle genjutsu to drive home the fact that it was, indeed, nothing special. He wasn't faking their emotions or thoughts or the like, just subtly reinforcing any doubts they might have had about Kirao's condition and Naruto's talents. The normal genjutsus of his could never control anyone anyway. The trio would still remember the fight and all their conversations, it just wouldn't stand out as that important to them. While reporting to their superiors, for example, Naruto wasn't totally against using the Sharingan on less savory people. Also, being around for decades and seeing the worst humanity had to offer, Naruto had grown a lot smarter. A subtle illusion to protect his identity would go a long way in the future. He wasn't above using his abilities to subdue criminals and other scum of the earth, as he could properly sense their emotions before using his eyes on them. When his precious people were threatened, Naruto Uzumaki went out and the 7th Hokage came in. Naruto knew that he would eventually be outed, but he wanted to prolong that and relax for as long as possible. Once his name got out, many people from various groups would surely try to recruit him, to use him for their own goals. He didn't want to keep killing or erasing the memories of random goons sent to him. The trio nodded at his reasoning, Kirao having recovered by now. I knew it. Yeah, just one cuz I was drunk, Blondie. Thanks for the assist, Kirao. Though it did make Naruto wonder, why had he agreed to the fight anyway? He had been bored, but that wasn't sufficient to risk his peace like that. Then what? The answer to that question was looking at him, a proud look on her face. Glinda. Naruto wondered, why would I do something like that for her? I did act all friendly with her, but that's how I outwardly act with everyone. Naruto was really confused. He didn't realize that he had fought Kirao to defend Glinda until he actually reflected upon it. Why had he defended her, though? What was it about her that drew him in? He had not connected with any human for dozens of years. His harsh last years of life in the elemental nations had beaten that right out of him. Naruto recalled the day's events leading to the spar. He had seen the Huntsmen walk in, served them food, and talked to them for a bit. The Biju had been nagging him to settle down with someone, but Naruto was hesitant. Then why had he flirted with Glinda? Why had he asked for her scroll number? If it was only to keep in touch with a friend, why hadn't he asked the other two? It doesn't matter in the end anyway. Once she finds out about me she'll get scared and run like everyone else. He thought bitterly. He was reasonably apprehensive of letting people in, having experienced only pain in the past. I hope you change your mind, Naruto. You deserve so much better. Matabi thought sadly within the seal. Though Naruto would never be an emo like Sasuke, he still had his reservations trusting new people. His actions relating to Glinda were an enigma to him. He would probably communicate with her in the future, but Naruto doubted they would become close friends or something. Still, emotions were complicated and he had no desire to introspect right now. Grinning at the trio, Naruto replied, thanks guys, but enough about that. He suddenly spoke, clapping his hands. Let's have some food on the house. The three accompanied him inside, happy with this new development. It had been 3 days since the spar, and the Huntsmen had just left. They had finished their mission and headed back to Vale. Naruto was happy that he hadn't revealed anything. He liked his current situation too much. He had given his Hiraishin markers to the trio, but they would, conveniently, not reveal that fact to anyone. Still, he learned a lot about the three during their stay here, even going so far as to call them friends, in a loose sense of the word. Summer and Kirao were on a team together, called Team STRQ. The other two members were Kirao's sister and Summer's husband, whose names Naruto couldn't recall. The team was practically in shambles right now, due to the sister abandoning her daughter with their other male teammate, who later married Summer and had a daughter of their own. Summer wanted to use her job as a huntress to bring about an age of peace, much like Naruto himself had before he got a harsh reality check. Still, he dared not trample on the dreams of the excitable girl. Bright and kind people like her were truly a rarity anywhere, and Naruto didn't want to be the one to dampen her spirit. She was a boisterous girl, and she readily told him about her abilities in an effort to get a spar from him. Her semblance was speed-related, and she could achieve high speeds and disappear in a flurry of rose petals whenever she used it. Her weapons were twin short swords which apparently turned into guns, called Petal and Leaf. Her eyes were silver in color, which Naruto had strangely not seen on any other person in Remnant. They gave him a weird feeling, kind of like an inactive Sharingan. He knew better than to ask, though. It was this heroic personality and naive idealism of Summer's that made him want to protect her, hence, he had given her and her team a Hiraishin marker each. Even if Naruto wanted to stay in the shadows, he was still Naruto. He would protect such a heroic soul to the best of his ability. It had nothing to do with not revealing his abilities, as he could hide himself quite well. Kirao was substantially more closed off, though Naruto could sense a surprising amount of self-loathing from the hunter. Although, Naruto was a surprisingly good judge of character, if not the best ever. Kirao was a good man at heart, and much like Naruto, he would give his all to protect his precious people. His weapon was some kind of sword-scythe hybrid called Harbinger, and he could change its form at will. Kirao said nothing about his semblance. Glinda was the one he talked to the most. He never revealed anything concrete about himself, but he got along with her the best. She had a strict and stern personality, but underneath that hard shell was a wonderful young woman. She was already a teacher at Beacon Academy, and Naruto could tell that she cared a lot for her students. He liked someone who could properly guide the next generation, unlike how he had been taught. Her weapon was a riding crop called the Disciplinarian, and that was it. She mainly used it to channel her semblance, which was telekinesis. It was the coolest semblance Naruto had seen so far, much like the Shinra Tensei. They left soon after the third day, leaving Naruto to contemplate the conversations he had had with them. It was at this point, after lots of goading from the Biju, that Naruto decided to actively try to get to know Glinda in the future. He didn't make any promises, but he would just do what he wanted regardless of the consequences. It was how he worked best, after all. Naruto wondered when he would be seeing these people in the future. Flashback end Naruto appeared at the location where his marker had been dropped, Sharingan already active to maximize his reaction time. And he was glad he did, as he was immediately forced to duck to avoid a giant claw. He quickly dodged the blow, jumped back and took stock of the situation, and he was not amused. There were about 100 Grimm around him, from Beowulf to Nevermore alike. Some of the trees next to him were uprooted, signifying a fierce fight. The Grimm were all growling menacingly, itching to attack him. It was then that he realized what they were attacking, or rather who. Seeing the downed and bleeding form of Summer Rose, Naruto clicked into motion. He didn't think at all, he moved. Summer Rose had seen better days. She was on a top-secret mission from Ozpin, to find a Grimm infestation in a cave near the outskirts of Vale, in hopes of locating Salem. She had left behind her husband and 2 daughters for a week, just for this mission. And now here she was, cornered by limitless Grimm and surely going to die. It had been going swimmingly too. The job was pretty simple after all. But she hadn't expected this many Grimm. Her scroll had been shattered in the heat of battle, she couldn't even call for help. Whenever she killed a Grimm, 2 more would take its place. They were unending and relentless. It made her wonder why there were so many here in the first place. Summer hadn't had any particular negative emotions, then why? It was almost as if they were waiting for her. Any other thoughts were banished from her head as she rolled to the right to avoid a brutal sideswipe. Summer could easily defeat a few dozen Grimm lying down, but hundreds? All by herself? After already having fought hundreds before? No, she wasn't as confident. So this is how I die. She thought sadly, Tai, Ruby, Yang, I'm so sorry. And she resigned herself to her fate. But she would not go quietly. If she was going to die, she would take as many Grimm with her as she could. Her only regret would be not having a happy life with her family. Then she remembered. 2 years ago, at the ramen stand in Vacuo. How could she forget? The owner, Naruto, had defeated both Kirao and her in fair spars. And he had given her a small knife, which she still possessed. She had to throw it when in danger, and he would be there in a flash, Naruto had said. Not bothering to question why she had suddenly remembered this fact, Summer fished out the small knife from her holster, prayed to the gods, and threw. When Naruto saw the broken and bleeding Huntress surrounded by Grimm, his brain went on autopilot. All thoughts of hiding his abilities went out of the window, his sole focus being the safety of Summer. However jaded he might be, Naruto Uzumaki would never allow a good person to die on his watch, for the sole purpose of hiding his powers. He wasn't, and would never be, that kind of person. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The newly created clone instantly appeared at Summer's side, already healing her with his Yang seal. Now that she was in safe hands, it was time to deal with these pests. Naruto scanned the situation for the optimal way to end this fight. He was flanked by Grimm on one side, and Summer had been backed up against a wall. That was convenient, there would be no need to divulge his more nuanced abilities. Thinking of the name of the technique, Naruto took a deep breath and held 2 fingers in front of his lips. Exhaling with a mighty roar, he let loose his technique. Kaden. Goka Mekyaku. Fire release, great fire annihilation. A torrent of flames spewed forth from his mouth, much to the shock of the recently recovered Summer. The Grimm never stood a chance. All of them were caught in the sea of flames, instantly reduced to ashes. Not a single foe remained, and only then did Naruto turn around. He silently threw a kunai in a far corner of the cave, destroying a small Grimm watching from the shadows. But the damage was already done, not that he knew. Turning around, he was met with the shocked gaze of Summer Rose, who was practically speechless, not being able to come up with words. Ordinarily she would be bouncing up and down in excitement, but she was too tired, spent by all the fighting. Hesitantly, she ventured. Mr. Naruto? Naruto looked sheepishly at her, scratching the back of his head. Yo? Naruto said sheepishly, scratching the back of his head. Summer was speechless. One moment, she thought she would die, and the next thing she knew, she was safe, sound, and healed. And the ramen stand owner from 2 years ago, Naruto, had saved her. In this frazzled state, Summer came up with the most eloquent reply. "You wa how she sputtered, struggling to come to terms with the situation. "Whoa, slow down, Summer. You're hyperventilating." Naruto comforted the woman, deep breaths. Summer reluctantly stopped her rant as she composed herself. She took a few long breaths as she regained her bearings. Having sufficiently calmed down after 10 minutes, she began interrogating him. "How did you come here? What was that knife you gave me? Why did I just remember it? What was that fire attack right now?" Summer blurted out, breathing heavily. To say that she was confused was an understatement, and she needed some answers. Naruto heard all her questions with a straight face, but he was having an internal debate. He obviously wasn't going to reveal all of his abilities, but the problem was exactly how much to disclose. Some secrets were out, and Naruto wasn't going to make up some lies to explain them away. He would just answer sparingly, is all. There was no advantage to stay completely hidden. He was entangled in this mess for good now. "I hope we get some good fights now," Son Goku spoke from his mind, with some others agreeing. "It's getting boring here." "Summer, I am not going to tell you all my secrets, but I will tell you some things," he began, ignoring Summer's instant retort. "I came here because you threw my knife. It's an ability of mine, which allows me to teleport to wherever my knife is." He sat down next to Summer, who was still processing his words. "You don't remember me giving you the knife because I made it so that you would only realize it at the last moment." "But what if I hadn't?" Summer shouted indignantly. "What if I had died?" "But you didn't, did you?" Naruto poked her forehead. "It was meant to activate as a last resort, to save your life." She pouted. "But why make it so? Wouldn't it be easier to make me remember it, so I could have called you earlier?" Naruto sighed at this. He didn't want to get into the whole debate about paranoia with Summer, so he just decided to be honest. "I did it so that you guys wouldn't reveal my existence to anyone, as I wanted to remain hidden, but that's a moot point now." Summer seemed confused and turned somber. "Then why save me at all?" "Because even though I wanted to stay hidden, I absolutely could not let a pure soul like you die, ya know?" Naruto said, with a soft smile. "The world needs people like you, Summer. And you remind me so much of myself as a child that it's not even funny." Also, Naruto's instincts were telling him that he had been found out already. That last Grimm he killed had been sketchy and warranted investigation. Summer beamed at the praise, momentarily forgetting their situation. Then she realized their plight and spoke. "Come to think of it, I shouldn't have needed help in the first place." She put her chin in her hands. "There was an unnatural number of Grimm here." Naruto hummed. "It seems like the higher-ups are keeping secrets from you, Summer. In Naruto's world, shinobi who got too close to some dark secret were often given solo missions to do, which mostly resulted in accidents. It was an efficient way to silence people who got too snoopy for their own good. But why would Ospin?" Summer was deep in thought, the facts of the situation contradicting with her trust in Ospin. "Well then, let's get you home, Summer." Naruto grinned and gently grasped her hand. "Brace yourself. It gets nauseating for first-timers. How are you going to whoa?" And they vanished in a flash of orange, their destination unknown. The office of Ospin at Beacon Academy was a mass of nerves and panic. 4 people were present, out of which 3 were standing. Ospin was sitting in his chair with closed eyes, drinking his coffee. Glinda stood behind Ospin, looking no less distressed with the situation. She was idly fiddling with her riding crop in nervousness. Kirao was pacing back and forth, taking swigs from his flask. "Oz, this doesn't look good. It's been a week. Where could she be? We have to go find her. Let's assemble a search party." The man who spoke was Taiyang Xiaolong, Summer's husband, and Ruby and Yang's father. He was understandably the antsiest of them all, as his wife had been missing for a week. Any attempts to contact her had resulted in failure. Her trail had gone cold. Now, let's calm ourselves." Ospin cut in. "I'm sure Miss Rose will be just fine." "You don't know that, Oz," Kirao shouted indignantly. "Why the hell did you send her solo to a Grimm nest anyway? It was supposed to be a simple mission. I didn't know it would go awry." Ospin defended himself. "Salem has probably acted. She must be hunting the silver-eyed warriors." The members of his circle tensed at Ospin's words. Ospin had told them about Salem and the gods but had left out his past relationship with her. "And what possessed you to send her out then? I did not foresee Salem making her move so quickly, Kirao." Ospin sipped his coffee. "It wasn't supposed to be this way." "Bullshit. Are you saying, Kirao?" Glinda cut him off harshly. "Can't you see that the headmaster is just as distraught as you are? Lay off him, would you?" One look at Ospin confirmed that he was just as anxious as the rest of them. Ospin never liked sending his allies to die, but he wasn't brave enough to face his past. Ospin always knew that his secrets would get someone killed, and it would seem that such a future had come to pass. Taiyang, who was silent till now, spoke up in a cold voice. Ospin, I don't care about your excuses. He whispered, but if anything happens to Summer, I will never forgive you. He finished while glaring at the headmaster. His daughters would be absolutely devastated if anything happened to Summer, as would he. No one would be able to save Ospin from him in that case. Before Ospin could retort, the occupants of the office were blinded by a flash of orange. In the land of darkness stood a massive castle built out of rock and purple crystal, glinting ominously in the night. It was an enormous structure, with haunting beauty much like that of the deep ocean. The castle was surrounded by grim pools, which were spawning everything from Beowulfs to Goliaths. No other form of life was present, the area was entirely devoid of vitality. It was the Evernight Castle, where the Queen of Grimm resided and operated from. Said queen was sitting on her ornate crystal throne in the dimly lit throne room of her lair. She was known by many names, the most notable of them being Salem, the lonely girl in the tower. She was wearing an elegant black robe, which complemented her white hair and red eyes quite well. An interesting person has appeared, Salem said as she focused through the small Grimm she was using to watch the Rose Girl die. It had been a simple matter. Salem was remotely supervising a new type of Grimm in the nest, and Summer's arrival was little more than sheer luck. And the moment Salem had seen those accursed silver eyes, she had redirected all nearby Grimm to finish her off, once and for all. But she had not anticipated the arrival of a new, unknown variable. Several things worried Salem about the occurrence, mainly the mysterious man's abilities. Magic, perhaps? She thought, as she had no other explanation for the blonde's mastery over fire. But magic was supposed to be extinct. Salem, Ozma and the maidens were the only remaining practitioners in Remnant. Then there was the matter of his teleportation ability, which allowed him to appear to aid the huntress. That ability would prove extremely useful to Salem. It interested her. Imagine being able to go to any place, regardless of distance, and what if he could transport other people, too? Even better, this was a fascinating ability, indeed. Salem needed that man on her side, and she needed him now. The blonde did not appear to be allied to any faction she'd have known of him otherwise. Good. That meant he was untethered, free. Such men could be bought over, if not threatened. And there was no price Salem would not pay for the man. A pawn like that would be priceless for her future endeavors. Hazel, she said in a silky voice, find any information you can about this man. She displayed the man's image on the wall. Blonde hair, blue eyes, and an impressive height. Salem had to admit, if she had any other emotions than hatred and anger, she might have even been attracted to him. As you command, my lady. A deep voice said, belonging to a man. He could be described as a wall of muscle with dark brown hair and a goatee. His eyes, ironically, were hazel. Hazel was quite scared of Salem and knew that it would be better to obey her orders without question. He valued his life, after all. And little Cinder is in vacuo. Tell her to keep an eye out for him as well. Salem said, she might as well find some minions for herself. It shall be done. So, let me get this straight, Tai said, looking at Naruto and Summer. After the two had suddenly appeared in the office, pandemonium had ensued. It had taken Summer stepping in and shouting at her teammates to calm them down. Now they were sitting in line, waiting for an explanation. You run a ramen stand in vacuo. Naruto nodded. These three visited you 2 years ago. Nod. And you gave them a magic knife, which Summer used to call you to her. Essentially, yes. Naruto agreed. The four went silent, trying to process this information. Glinda looked at Naruto and gave him a small wave, which he returned. Her gaze then turned stern, making Naruto inwardly sweat. This was going to be a tedious explanation. You really expect me to believe that? Kirao shouted. You barely beat me in a spar the other time. Then he paused. Wait, you beat me, didn't ya? Why'd I just remember that? He shouted, pulling on his hair. See, I told you so. Naruto snarked, grinning madly. It was always fun to pull one over others. It reminded him of the not-so-good old days. I am also quite puzzled by this development. Glinda chimed in, pushing up her glasses with a finger, but I suppose I believe you. She gave Naruto a look, which told him that their conversation wasn't finished. If you had magic all along, why'd you do a mind trick on them? Taiyang narrowed his eyes at him. And how can we trust you now? Couldn't it just be another trick of yours? Naruto rubbed the bridge of his nose and looked at them. Look, guys. The magic was only to hide my existence, he said, making air quotes for magic, and as for trust, has my behavior warranted otherwise? That's the thing, it hasn't, Tai retorted, this could all be another trick. Glinda looked ready to come to her friend's defense, but Naruto cut her off. Look, Taiyang, was it? He asked, getting a nod. I knew this would happen. Any ability involving the mind is accompanied by a fundamental level of distrust. He looked at Tai pointedly, so answer a few questions for me. If I can't be trusted, why are we even having this conversation? Couldn't I just wipe your memories and leave? You could have some other endgame. Okay, next question. What endgame can't I accomplish by simply subjugating you four completely? Naruto asked, gaining apprehensive looks from those present. You don't know my abilities, aside from memory control and teleportation. What can you give me that I can't just take myself? Well, you've gotta want something, Taiyang retorted weakly. He didn't want to admit it, but the blonde's arguments were sound. He couldn't fathom what use they could have to someone not bound by geography or liability. Naruto's point seemed to hit home, as the other occupants seemed to relax as well. Seeing as he was winning them over, Naruto decided to go for the cincher. And if I can't be trusted, why did I save Summer and return her to you, safe and sound? That removed almost all distrust they had about Naruto. It was true, he could have simply left Summer to die, or killed her himself, or converted her into a sleeper agent. There was no need to show himself. But that lingering feeling still remained. It was natural to feel anxious in the presence of someone who could freely manipulate minds. I trust you, Naruto. Everyone looked at Glinda, who had spoken. Naruto had an absolutely beaming grin on his face, conveying his happiness. I have become good friends with him ever since we met all those years ago, she said. We regularly correspond with each other on our scrolls. He is a kind man, and I trust him. Glinda finished with determination. Thanks, Glyn. Summer timidly raised her hand as if she were in class. I also trust him. He had no reason to save me, after all, she said softly, but then gained fire in her eyes. And when I asked him why he saved me, you know what he said? What? That I could not, and would not, let a pure soul like Summer die. Naruto interrupted her, making Summer nod vigorously. The action caused her hood to flutter behind her. Ah, that's so cute, Matabi purred in his mind. She's like a cute puppy. And coming from me, that's saying something. The rest of the Biju gave her weird looks as they scooted away from her. I don't trust you fully, but I thank you from the bottom of my heart for saving my wife, Taiyang spoke. A bit begrudgingly. His reservations aside, Naruto had been a massive help to him, and Taiyang appreciated that. And hopefully, we can become friends in the future. Looking forward to it. Naruto grinned. If this were 2 years ago, Naruto would have deflected and evaded the topic until it died. But due to Emerald, he was slowly returning to his older self. He could do with a few friends. He only knew Glinda so far. You saved my teammate, so we're smooth, Blondie. Crow slurred, slapping Naruto's back. The man was still drunk. Throughout this conversation, Ospin had remained silent. He was deep in thought concerning recent developments. This man was very powerful, and Ospin needed his help. His vast range of abilities would surely go a long way in ridding the world of Salem and securing a new era of peace. His supposed power over memories was frightening, but Naruto had made his case sufficiently. What was the ability he had, exactly? A semblance, perchance? No, surely not. His semblance was teleportation, wasn't it? Or was it control over fire? Then, something in Ospin's mind clicked. Vacuo, ramen shop, blonde owner, by the gods. How had he missed such a crucial detail? Mr. Uzumaki, was it? Just call me Naruto, I prefer it. Mr. Naruto, you say you run a food establishment in Vacuo? Ospin queried, ignoring Naruto's twitch at the deliberate use of Mr. Yes, why? Would it happen to be named Ichimaki Ramen? Naruto stiffened unnoticeably, but Ospin wasn't some wee tot. Being alive for eons had its perks, and analyzing subtle body cues was one such skill he had acquired. Pressing his advantage, Ospin continued. I only ask, as I have recently witnessed some most interesting news. Ospin then got his scroll out and played a video. A video Naruto knew all too well. For the next 2 minutes, the Huntsman watched as Franklin Winchester confessed to many crimes, issued a formal apology for his misdeeds, and practically turned himself in. And in a couple of frames, Naruto could be seen in the back, tending to the shop. 4 sets of eyes rounded on the blonde shinobi, who was sweating in nervousness. Naruto had been caught red-handed. There was no escape. The incident with Winchester had happened just this morning, and here he was. Still, Naruto tried to defend himself. He was being a meanie? He whimpered, hoping they would let it slide. They did not. Fine, I did it. He insulted my daughter, ya know? Naruto bit out, not at all happy at being put on the spot. So much for Mr. Cool Ninja. Ha, Kurama jabbed at him, You should have 1,000 quips and excuses ready for any situation. Asterisk ya no? The mocking tone was not lost on Naruto, who swore to kick the furball's ass after this was over. Your daughter? Glinda whispered, looking lost for the first time. When did this happen? The others were just as interested. As the subject was changed to his daughter, Naruto's face burst into a bright grin. Yes, my daughter, he chirped. Her name's Emerald, and she's 7 years old. I love her to bits. Here, look, isn't she just the cutest little thing? He gushed excitedly. Naruto then reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He got out a photo and showed it to the four. It was a picture of Naruto and Emerald, and M was riding on his shoulders. She was wearing her green sundress and a red hair clip, which matched her eyes. The two were grinning at the camera, holding out peace signs. See? She's adopted, but I still love her as my own, believe it? The Huntsmen had to admit, it was an extremely cute sight. Summer cooed in delight, saying that the girl was just as cute as Yang and Ruby. Ospin was silent, plodding away. Even Glinda let out a small, "ah," in the adorable picture. Naruto was apparently a good father, a point to be noted for later. Kirao just let out a hum of agreement, while Taiyang gave a begrudging nod. He did not like the fact that the little girl was as cute as Yang and Ruby, but he'd never say it out loud. His girls were the cutest, still, he couldn't resist. My girls are cuter, Taiyang boasted, puffing out his chest in pride. Naruto's grin died faster than his irritation. Care to repeat that, Xiao Long? Instead of cowering before the demonized Naruto, Tai just glared at him. Did I stutter? I'll admit your daughter is adorable, but Ruby and Yang are cuter. Oh yeah? Show me a photo then. Taiyang did. It was another adorable photo. Summer was carrying Ruby, whose mouth was stuffed with cookies. Little Yang was hugging Taiyang's feet, grinning brightly. Naruto's confidence took a brutal blow. Damn. The Mo is strong with this one. Just like Tai, he didn't want to admit that any girl could be as cute as M. But before he could give a snarky retort. As amusing as this debate is, I believe we are getting off track. Ospin cut in, smiling. Naruto and Taiyang blushed before glaring at each other. Boys. Summer sighed, palming her face. Glinda just nodded. Yeah, Blondie, did ya do that to him? Kirao asked, pointing to the scroll. Naruto hummed. Yes, I did. But I did not control his memories or anything, ya know. It was just a compulsion to confess to his crimes. Naruto clarified their doubts. He has actually done all those bad things, I just made him more contemplative of his actions. But how did you know that he was a criminal? Naruto leaned in, beckoning them all to do the same. As they huddled up, Naruto made some dramatic gestures and whispered in a hushed tone. It's a secret. The occupants comically fell from their seats before righting themselves. Kirao glared at the cackling Naruto, rubbing a bump on his head. Damn it, man, be serious. Naruto just shrugged. What, do you expect me to tell you every single one of my abilities? If so, you're sadly mistaken. We aren't that close yet. Glinda and Summer actually looked hurt at that, but Naruto couldn't be sure. Naruto clapped his hands. Now then, mind telling me what this whole mess is? Ospin and his group tensed marginally, but Naruto caught them. The most telling reactions were from Glinda and Summer, who couldn't look him in the eye. Look, guys. Since I am involved in this mess for good, I think I deserve to know anything of importance. Naruto sighed. I can't put my daughter in danger of unknown threats. Ospin looked hesitant, while the others just waited for what he would say. Ospin was torn between recruiting this man for his own cause and just lying to him and sending him on his way. But lying to him was practically useless, as they didn't know the full extent of Naruto's abilities. What will you do if I were to refuse? Ospin asked, sipping his coffee. Will you just forcibly take the information? Naruto looked affronted at the veiled accusation. Of course not. That would defeat the point of this whole meeting. He then scratched his cheek, and the last Grim I killed seemed fishy. Like it wasn't made for combat, but surveillance. Both Naruto and Ospin knew that it was a test, which Naruto had passed. Ospin then decided to take a gamble and try to recruit Naruto to the cause of justice. From his last statement, it would appear that Salem had already gotten wind of him. She would be sending her minions to recruit Naruto soon enough, as she would come to know about the video as he had. And if she told him the truth about Ospin, it was as good as over. Ospin placed his coffee on the desk and got up. Very well, Mr. Uzumaki. Have you heard of the tale of the lonely girl in the tower? After a lengthy explanation, Ospin had left the office to give Naruto some time to mull over the new information. Summer and Tai had departed to check on their daughters, and Kirao had gone off to some tavern. Naruto, you do realize that he was hiding a lot, don't you? Gyuki said, there is more to that man than meets the eye. He finished, making Naruto hum in agreement. The man was sneaky, and Naruto would not be working under him if he could help it. It was just him and Glinda left in the office. Speaking of Glinda, she was sternly looking Naruto in the eye, not too happy about the situation. "Glin," Naruto began, but was cut off. "Don't, Naruto. Let me speak." She raised her hand. "While I am hurt that you didn't trust me enough to reveal your abilities to me, I can see where you're coming from." She adjusted her glasses slightly. Glinda then sat next to Naruto and placed a hand on his shoulder. "But I'd like to think that we've become good friends in the very least, and I can only hope that you'll open up to me in the future." She finished, smiling softly. "But for now, tell me about your daughter." "It will take some time, but I'm going to make an effort," Naruto said softly. "My daughter has helped me in that regard. I only ask that you give me the time I need." He looked her deep in the eyes. "Can you do that for me?" Glinda didn't even think about her response. "Take, however long you need, I'll be right here with you." "Thanks, Glin." Naruto grinned, and then he turned happy. "Oh, yes, my daughter, let me tell you." And the two friends spoke for hours, catching up on lost time. "No," Emerald glared as she pushed away the plate of vegetables in front of her, only to have it pushed back by her father. "Em-chan, you have to eat your vegetables, ya know?" "But why?" Emerald whined as she warily eyed the greens on the table. Naruto sighed and rubbed his forehead in annoyance. It was a long-standing debate between them. Naruto wanted Emerald to become healthier, and she wanted nothing to do with her vegetables. It really was a challenging job, being a parent. As cute as his daughter was sometimes, she sure could be a handful. "They're good for your health, Em." The girl just glared harder at the plate and made gagging sounds. "But they're so gross." "Em-chan, don't you want to become a big, strong huntress?" Naruto looked at her pointedly. "You need to eat your veggies for that." Em straightened up as she thought about it. Papa had started training her in the physical and mental aspects of combat. She had a medium-intensity workout every day, coupled with a balanced diet. She was getting stronger slowly with each passing day, so she should stick to her meal plan. But since when did small children care about logic? Broccoli was gross, simple as that. "You never eat vegetables, Papa. Only ramen and other junk food," she deadpanned. "She's got ya there, son," Goku guffawed. Emerald was rewarded with a flick to the forehead. "OWW," she rubbed her red forehead and glared at him. "I don't need nutrition to survive anymore, Em." Naruto smirked. "I only eat food because it tastes good." It was a fact which Naruto was very thankful for. Due to him being a chakra entity, Naruto had no requirement of physical sustenance. He only ate or drank because he enjoyed it. "That's now when you're all magic-y." Emerald pouted childishly. She had long since lost count of her father's many abilities and powers. "What about when you were my age?" "Oh." Shomei winced in his mind. Even if M didn't intend to hurt him, it still must have stung. Naruto's mood turned somber as his eyes lost some of their joyful spark. Emerald caught on to the general vibe, but before she could ask further, Naruto spoke in a low voice. "That was because I had neither any fresh vegetables nor anybody to cook them for me, M-chan." He looked at her, smiling sadly. Instant ramen was cheap, and the only thing a small child could easily make. Naruto was never actually poisoned or starved in his childhood, but many shops treated him unfairly, often selling him rotten produce at high prices. It was no wonder that he had gravitated towards Ichiraku. Warm, home-cooked meals at a discount were any frugal orphan's dream. It also helped that the shop owners didn't actively ignore him. M's eyes widened at his answer and the sad look on his face. How could she have forgotten his past? They had formed a soul bond, for God's sake. Then her eyes widened further as she realized what she'd done. She had hurt her father. The very man who had taken her in from the streets, saved her from the hell of poverty and showed her endless love and affection. His childhood was just as bad as hers was, in a different way. And now Emerald had gone and brought up painful memories. Naruto might have gotten over it, but she didn't care. If not for their complete trust in each other, Emerald might have feared for her safety. She would have been afraid of being abandoned or hit for her mistake. But no, Em knew. She understood that Naruto wouldn't leave her or hurt her in any manner whatsoever. If it were someone else, then maybe. But not her, never her. Emerald knew that no matter what she did, Naruto would forgive her, put on a fake grin and move on with their lives. It was the kind of person he was. And that made her heart hurt even more. Emerald teared up and looked at Naruto with wide red eyes. "I'm so sorry, Papa. I didn't mean it." She looked away, too ashamed to even face him. She was the worst daughter ever. Good girls didn't hurt their papas like this. Em looked up when she felt a hand gently patting her on her head, giving her a sense of comfort that she didn't think she deserved. Naruto was looking at her with his damned understanding gaze, which wasn't helping matters in the slightest. "I know, sweetie. You don't have to apologize. Emerald felt no appeasement from Naruto's consolation as she'd expected. She instead felt anger, a sense of suffocating unease, coiling around her little heart. Em was angry at herself for being so tactless and idiotic. She was angry at the world they lived in, for their less than ideal lives. But most of all, she was angry at Naruto. She hated how he would go to any lengths for people important to him, how he would lay down life and limb for them at the drop of a hat. It was how people stabbed you in the back, a sign of weakness. It was a sudden thought, but Naruto instantly forgiving her sparked something within the little girl. It came out of nowhere, this intense frustration and rage. Any girl would be happy at being let off easily, but not this time. Emerald needed to clear the air. No, Em muttered, looking down. What was that, Em? I said no, Em shouted, surprising Naruto. No, you can't just forgive everything everyone does. You can't just let people get away with things. She had angry tears in her eyes, showing just how frustrated she was. She needed to get her message across, needed to tell him just how stupid he was being. The argument wasn't just about her anymore. It was about his general behavior. What are you? You always do this, Papa, Em angrily said, rubbing at her eyes. When you call someone precious to you, you just let them walk all over you. No matter what they do or say, you never hold a grudge. I don't do that, Em, Naruto said, grinning unsurely. He was confused. One moment, they were talking about vegetables, but the conversation seemed to have escalated to a new level. Don't lie to me, she snapped, truly enraged now. She knew exactly the kind of person he was, and he was still lying to her. Your teammates, teacher, old man Hokage, even your godfather, she shouted, making Naruto wince a little with every new name. They all treated you badly, but did you hold anything against them? When Naruto had told Em about his past, she thought he would be enraged at half the people in his life for how they behaved with him. The third told him to work to earn the village's approval when he didn't have to. Sasuke stabbed him in the chest, both really and emotionally. Sakura made him promise to bring back a criminal, even going so far as to confess to him falsely. Kakashi did not teach him anything other than tree walking and the clone method, and Jiraiya didn't visit him even once during his childhood. Needless to say, Emerald was furious at these people for their treatment of her father. They were precious to me, Em-chan, of course I didn't. Naruto explained, trying to reason with his daughter. He was grateful for the people in his life, as they saved him from his loneliness. Why would he hold a grudge when they had done so much for him? There is a difference between helping people and letting them take advantage of you. It makes you weak. But no, let me finish, Emerald bit out. She was this close to openly crying. She herself didn't know why she was so angry. Her father had always been like this, so what had changed? There was this nagging feeling bubbling up in her chest, and she was feeling lost. Why was he being so difficult? Em wanted to yell at him, she wanted to cry for him, but she also wanted to hug him. With her limited vocabulary, Emerald couldn't express appropriately that she felt frustrated that Naruto had no self-worth. She wanted to tell Naruto that he had someone who loved him, and he couldn't just go forgiving every single person he came across, as it made him weak. She knew that much from the streets. An eye for an eye was what went on, not turning the other cheek. Now if only she could identify and articulate those thoughts properly. Em then tried a different angle. Who's precious to you now? She asked. The Biju and you. Naruto answered instantly. While he was becoming friends with Team STRQ, they weren't as close to him as his daughter was. Emerald nodded, having expected this answer. And if I steal lots of money from you and run away, what will you do? You won't do that. But what if I do? Then I'll bring you back. Naruto grinned. Emerald gulped, fought back her tears and whispered, but what if I don't want to come back with you? She said, what if I was just using you? She didn't need to look to see the hurt flash across Naruto's eyes. She couldn't. Otherwise, her feeble resistance would break down, and she would start crying as well. Then, I would leave you be, after making sure that you were safe, Naruto said with a heavy heart. This conversation, even though hypothetical, was stinging him quite a bit. He knew that Em loved him, but the thought of her just using him and then leaving him was a tough pill to swallow. See? This is what I mean, won't you feel sad, angry, something? She yelled, tears freely flowing from her eyes. Of course I would, ya know, Naruto too raised his voice, but if it's what you wanted, I'd let you go. Emerald raised her voice as well, so much so that she was screaming, but what about what you want? Won't you punish me for using you, for taking advantage of you? She was waving around her hands, frantically. No, because I love you. Why would I punish you? Emerald was close to tearing out her hair in frustration. You're not getting me. She shook her head from side to side. Her emotions were all over the place, and Naruto's denseness wasn't helping. Then take a deep breath, think about it and explain it to me, Naruto soothed. M did just that. I love you, Papa, she said, making Naruto smile, and I would never use you like that. But the next person you let in might. And like you said with me, you won't do anything against them. You need to think about yourself too. At this point, M's 7-year-old heart could take no more. The dam burst and her tears sprung forth. She started sobbing in her chair, furiously wiping her eyes clean. She had grown up in a dog-eat-dog world, so she could not understand Naruto's reasons for acting so selflessly. It was new to her, loving someone so unconditionally as Naruto did. According to her, the next person who Naruto let in might use him for their own benefit and then leave without consequence. Naruto gently scooped up the crying girl and embraced her, placing her in his lap. He gently started stroking her hair, which made her cry even harder. Just like you love me, I love you too. Emerald yelled between hiccups, and I care about your happiness too. She was sobbing by now, unable to form coherent sentences anymore. She clung to him like a lifeline, afraid of losing him. Naruto just settled for comforting her, stroking her green locks and patting her back softly. There. I'm right here, don't worry, he cooed. He still didn't understand her point entirely, but luckily he had some advisors. What do you guys think? I'm being serious here, please tell me what I missed. It's simple, brat. Kurama groused. She has a faint idea of your self-destructive behavior, and she doesn't like it. Consider it a consequence of your bond. Kurama would usually let Naruto figure out his own mistakes, but he wasn't solely at fault here. My behavior isn't self-destructive, ya know, Naruto retorted, appearing in his mind, and what did you mean, consequence? Kurama simply gave him a flat look, the other Biju watching in silence. Your behavior isn't self-destructive now, when you know that not everyone deserves a second chance. But can you seriously tell me that it wasn't in your childhood? At Naruto's sheepish silence, he continued. And as for the consequence part, it is an effect of ninshu. Naruto looked intrigued at that, eager to learn anything about the lucrative power. What effect is that? The girl knows your true self, Naruto. She also knows that you would do anything in your power to help her, regardless of your own happiness. If we take her childhood into account, such pure affection is foreign to her. Naruto hummed in thought at that. So both he and M were only half right here? She thought that he would sacrifice his own happiness for strangers, but he wasn't like that anymore. And the idea of loving someone enough to forgive their faults was foreign to her, which she thought of as weak, saying that he would be taken advantage of. He needed to explain his point properly to her. He couldn't bear to see his little girl so distressed. I think I get it, Kurama. Thanks, Naruto grinned and vanished from his mind. Looking at his daughter weeping in his lap, Naruto had to steel himself, lest he start crying as well. He gently nudged M, who looked up at him with puffy red eyes. Papa, Naruto picked her up and sat her down on the table, so she was eye level with him. I see your point, sweetie, but let me explain something to you, okay? M simply nodded, rubbing at her eyes. My actions in my childhood were one thing, but I am not like that anymore. I won't fight for the happiness of others, at the cost of my own. He stopped her retort with a look. That being said, once someone is precious to me, I will put them ahead of myself because that is what it means to care for someone, you included. M went silent at that, mulling over his words. But what if someone takes advantage of you? That was her main problem, the thing she couldn't understand. That's the thing, M. You're viewing my childhood as the norm. He chuckled somberly. My old friends were a poor example for my case. Let me ask you something. Will you ever take advantage of me? No, M retorted instantly, hurt at his implication. Naruto just pinched her cheeks, making her glare at him. See, I know you won't because I trust you. And only those I can trust become precious to me. But how do you know that they won't betray you? Will I ever betray you, M-chan? No. Why do you say that? Because I trust you, M whispered, her eyes widening. Seeing her speechless state, Naruto pressed on. Do you get it, sweetie? When you trust someone, you just do. You trust that they won't betray you. M looked fit to cry again. But won't you be the one getting hurt in the end if someone does betray you? She looked away from him. That last statement brought a frown from Naruto. There seemed to be more to it than it appeared. This isn't entirely about me, is it? M flinched, still looking away, some fresh tears slipping from her eyes. She felt Naruto's hands on her shoulder and whispered. I just don't want us to be hurt again. There. Such a simple sentence, but it explained so much to Naruto. M was having trouble trusting people. She didn't want to let anyone close, as she didn't want to get hurt. Her past life had made her very guarded, and Emerald was worried that she or Naruto would get hurt. That's the thing, M-chan. We never know until we try. Trust doesn't work like that, ya know? It's called a leap of faith, for a reason. M looked conflicted, but Naruto knew just the thing to say. That's why we have each other, M-chan. When she looked to him, he continued. You might not forgive them, even if they betray you. But never seek revenge, okay? His gaze turned hard, making M straighten up. That's another reason why I forgave people so easily in the past. Hatred breeds more hatred, and it becomes a cycle. While not for strangers, my code still stands for my precious people. I'll never leave you, Emerald. If someone wants to betray you, they'll have to go through me first. He declared, making M smile slightly, and you'll do the same for me, won't ya? She nodded fervently, hair bobbing due to the action. Naruto hugged Emerald again, but this time she was eager to reciprocate, so don't hesitate to form bonds. Okay. And remember, I will always be watching over you. He patted her head, and he could feel some tears staining his shirt. He smiled, glad that these were happy tears. Naruto simply comforted her as she clung to him, hiccuping softly and wiping her tears. As Emerald was getting sleepy, Naruto decided to carry her to her bed. This conversation was taxing for both of them, but it was necessary. M needed to form her own bonds so that she would have friends other than Naruto. While Naruto would love it to be just the two of them, a growing girl needed to have lots of relationships, not only with her father. She could not always rely on him, it wasn't healthy. They reached M's bedroom, which was painted green, a slightly darker shade than her hair. Her bed was a soft single bed with pink sheets. Naruto gently placed her in her bed and tucked her in so that just her face was sticking out of the blanket. She looked so adorable, all warm and snuggly like that. Naruto turned off her light and made to leave. Just as he reached the door, he heard a faint whisper. Goodnight, Papa. Love you. I love you too, M-chan. Sleep well. Once out in the hall, Naruto decided to take matters into his own hands. His little girl needed good friends and fast. Naruto got out his scroll and dialed a number on it. He held it to his ear and smiled as it was answered. Hello. Hi, Summer, it's Naruto. I'd like to take you up on your offer if that's alright? Oh, that? Absolutely. How about this Sunday night? I'll call the team and Glinda as well. Summer replied on the other end, clearly excited to plan their meeting. The plan, in itself, was nothing special. Since Summer had two daughters of her own, she had asked Naruto to arrange a playdate between their girls. He was already going to agree, but today's events just emboldened him further. It would be good for M to make friends with girls close to her own age. Great, looking forward to it. After returning downstairs, Naruto pulled down the shutter and locked all the doors. Since they lived above the shop itself, they had no daily commute. You handled that splendidly. Isobu praised. The old you would have gotten into a heated argument which would have done more harm than good. Naruto blushed in embarrassment at that. It sounded exactly like him. But I can't behave like that anymore, ya know? I have a daughter to raise. Yes. And she's going to turn into an amazing woman in the future. Of course. She's my daughter, after all. Naruto boasted, puffing out his chest in pride. She's the best, believe it. Matabi, seeing a chance, pounced on the blonde. And M's going to get so many boys vying for her hand, she teased with a grin. What shall you do when someone asks her out, I wonder? And what about her first crush, Naruto pummeled the shutter and instantly destroyed it, but it was the last thing on his mind. No, Naruto Uzumaki was angry. He glared at the broken shutter with immense rage, before reducing it to nothing with Amaterasu. Naruto was more furious than he had been in many years, and there was one single thought coursing through his mind. It was a frightening thought, but inevitable. M was almost 8, and she was growing up so fast. Naruto created a new shutter for the shop, the haunting prospect never leaving him. We're here, M. Be sure to behave yourself, okay? Naruto looked down at his daughter. He was wearing an orange shirt and blue jeans, while Emerald was in a blue dress. The two of them were standing outside the front door of a house. Emerald rolled her eyes. Yes, Papa. I know, she grumbled. She wasn't too happy to be here, but she had little choice. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the quip. That's some attitude for a girl who can't eat her vegetables. His daughter puffed out her cheeks in embarrassment. I can too. Shut up, she pouted and looked away. Ah, that's adorable, Yano. Naruto patted her head, embarrassing her further. He then knocked on the door and straightened his collar. Be sure to make some good friends, okay? Emerald nodded tentatively and waited for the door to open. A couple of days after their argument, Naruto had told her that he had arranged a playdate for her. At first, the very thought offended her. She was a strong girl, and she most certainly did not need playdates. She had been through too much to find playing hide and seek with some girls enjoyable. She had outgrown such childish games long ago. But Papa had said that this was good for her, so here they were. He said that she needed to make more friends and enjoy her childhood while she still could. The duo soon heard a pitter-patter of small steps, moving ever closer to the door. It wasn't even 5 seconds, and the door creaked open to reveal, no one. Hello? Naruto looked from side to side, trying to find someone. Summer? Hello. At the sound of the squeaky voice, Naruto looked downwards. Nothing. Lower still. Nothing. When his gaze was almost at knee level, he found the culprit. She's so tiny. Naruto cooed in his mind upon seeing who it was. The little girl was just that. Little. She was even shorter than M. She was wearing a reddish-black cloak, and she was holding a cookie almost as big as her head. Hello. The small girl waved, entirely unaware of Naruto's internal monologue. Who you? After speaking, she took a huge bite of the cookie in her hand and slowly chewed on it, which made her look like a chipmunk. Naruto looked again at the kid, his lips twitching upwards at that cute attempt to form a sentence. One glance at his daughter surprised him more. Emerald was moving a hand horizontally between them as if to see how much taller she was than the little girl. This was all too adorable. You must be Ruby. Naruto began, getting a happy nod from her. I'm Naruto. Is your mom home? Yeah. I'll call her. Ruby declared with raised arms, crumbs spilling out with each word. Just as she was about to turn around, a loud voice interrupted her. Ruby. How many times have I told you not to open the door? Oh, Naruto. Summer appeared in the doorway, looking slightly worried. Please come in, you two. She beckoned them inside. After they had walked into the hallway, she turned to Ruby. Young lady, what do you have to say for yourself? Summer placed her hands on her hips, looking at Ruby pointedly. Ruby craned her neck up nearly 90 degrees to look at her angry mother. She held Summer's gaze for a while and slowly took another bite of her cookie without averting her eyes. Eee, Shori. She squeaked, the words jumbled because of her full mouth. Summer just sighed and shook her head with a fond smile on her lips. This girl, she bent down and picked Ruby up, who was all too happy to snuggle into her arms. Let's introduce you to the guests, okay? Ruby's eyes brightened, and she grinned widely, yay. Naruto's clone was managing the shop while the original went with M to Summer's house. It was supposed to take them all day, and so the clone was very bored. Luckily, he was distracted by the sound of the door opening. Welcome to Ichimaki Ramen. My name's Naruto. The owner, Naruto, greeted the new customer as she walked in, trying not to frown from the negative emotions he could feel wafting off her. He really wanted to activate his ability, but there was no reason for him to, yet. Cinder looked around the shop she had entered and immediately found the man she had been looking for. He looked exactly like the description she had received. She would recruit him to her cause so that her lady would be pleased. Cinder needed power, and this man was the key to it. But for now, she had to play it smart. Even though she was merely 16, Cinder had plenty of experience with projecting a happy appearance. It would be needed to lure the shop owner into her clutches. She didn't care why such a supposedly powerful man was running a noodle shop. It didn't matter to her. All that mattered was his power, which would soon be hers. Miss. Cinder glanced at the shop owner, cursing herself for spacing out. Ah, yes. I would like one serving of whatever's the most popular, please. Naruto nodded. All right, one miso ramen, coming up. Cinder smiled. Thank you. After a few minutes, Naruto arrived with her order. Cinder thought she'd at least enjoy some food before they got down to business, and so she ate the fresh noodles as soon as they arrived. Delicious. Her eyes widened, the salty flavor of the broth suffusing her entire palate. Cinder had eaten noodles before, but these were the best by far. Sweet, salty and sour flavors were perfectly balanced, as all things should be. But most of all, she could feel the love and care which Naruto put into preparing her meal, the likes of which she'd never felt before. Cinder scoffed to herself. She must have genuinely had a sad life if the most cared for she ever felt was from a bowl of noodles made by a stranger. But she had no use for frivolous things like care. She only needed power. Cinder refused to be weak ever again, and love would not help her be stronger. While she was having her internal monologue, Cinder didn't notice a single tear escape her eye. As luck would have it, Naruto did. Naruto was growing increasingly worried. He was concerned that the girl was in some kind of trouble. One so young should not be having such turbulent negative emotions, after all. Having convinced himself that it was for his customer's benefit, Naruto activated his negative emotion sensing. So much anger, so much hate, Naruto thought, alarmed. What has she been through? She reminds me of M and Sasuke too. I'm at least gonna try to help her. I can't leave this alone. If it were some years ago, Naruto would probably not have cared as much. But seeing a little child so distressed reminded him of his own daughter. He couldn't simply ignore whatever was happening, and he had to at least make sure she was safe. Let's play catch. No, cards. No, what do you want to play, then? Yang crossed her arms in irritation at their guest. The girl was the same age as her, But she was acting so serious. She didn't want to play hide and seek, didn't want to play catch, she didn't want to play anything. She only seemed to behave normally around her father, who was talking with her parents and another blonde lady. Moom. She doesn't want to play anything. Yang called out to Summer, what do we do now? She was fast getting bored with just sitting around and suggesting games to Emerald. She wanted some excitement, she wanted to jump around and play catch, but this girl was being such a downer. Summer looked up from the sandwiches she was making, only to giggle at the sight in front of her, because Emerald was being pouty. Yang was being pouty. They just looked so cute pouting next to each other like that. Her little Ruby was holding a big glass of milk in her tiny hands, taking a break from the mountain of cookies in front of her. But before she could speak, Naruto chimed in. Play something together, ya know? We talked about this. Naruto sent a meaningful glance, which she caught. They seemed to have a conversation without speaking, which was surprisingly easy for them with their bond. They understood each other so well, it was almost like they were speaking physically. But these games are boring, Papa, I want to train instead. I know, but you need friends. And you'll enjoy any game if it's with good company, trust me. Grr. Okay. Turned to Yang and all but gritted out her following words. Fine, let's play. Woohoo, come on, Ruby, let's play Huntsmen. Yang squealed in delight and bounded off into the backyard. At the mention of playing the game, Ruby's eyes lit up. Yippee! With an excited cry, she bounded off her chair and dashed off behind Yang. Can be the grim. Emerald herself looked rather offended at the role that she was stuck with. Hey, I don't want to be a grim. I want to be a huntress. She stomped her foot on the ground petulantly. The last one to the tree is the grim, TCH. Emerald reluctantly bolted to the yard, but she could not keep the slight smile off her face. Seeing run outside to play, Naruto sighed in relief. At least she's getting along with them. That's great. It will do the kid good to have some friends. Saiken piped up from within his mind. Naruto nodded in agreement and was about to speak further when Glinda asked him a question. So, Naruto, what did you do before you opened your shop? Didn't you open it a couple of years ago? I kind of wandered around helping people. Just like a sage, ya know? He grinned and puffed out his chest in arrogance. He was always proud of being a sage. It sounded really sophisticated and cool. I dunno, Kirao chimed in. Don't sages have to be smart? Summer giggled at the jab, which made him smirk. Naruto's eye twitched, and he replied, and what does that make you, seeing as I kicked your ass while eating ramen? That was cheating. I want a rematch, Kirao yelled and slammed his hands on the table. You wanna go, chicken? Naruto taunted, hoping to get a rise out of him. Why, you? Kirao was interrupted when Glinda whacked him upside the head. Ow, what was that for? He pointed an accusing finger at the blonde huntress. Glinda sniffed and pushed up her glasses with a finger. It was for being uncultured and starting fights at the host's house. Always quick to defend your little boy foul, Kirao's retort was halted by another whack to the head. TCH. Women are so troublesome. He grumbled as he nursed his sore head. Peeved. Naruto snorted in his mind as soon as he heard that iconic line, but wisely did not show any of his amusement on his face. Not because he was scared, but because he was polite enough to not laugh at Glinda when she was defending him. Where are you from, Naruto? Summer inquired while she set the table. I'm not from around here, ya know? Naruto chuckled nervously, hoping that they would let it slide. However, his wish did not come to pass. Yeah, but where were you born? Tai questioned from across the table, and all the others were leaning forward in interest. Naruto looked hesitant to reply when his tenant spoke up. I think it would do you good to open up a bit, brat. These people do not have negative intentions towards you. Kurama prodded. You're starting to look like Sasuke, being all emo and broody. Critical hit. I'm from a faraway place, as in really far. Naruto ventured, still beating around the bush. Kirao was getting bored of the deflecting. Just tell us, ya big baby. Summer also nodded rapidly, just as excited to know. Naruto's brow twitched in annoyance at the crude statement. Oh, you wanna know? I'll show ya. Now that he decided to reveal that he was from another dimension, he might as well do it Naruto style, with flair. He said nothing, simply closed his eyes. Just as Kirao was about to go off again, his eyes reopened. But they were not the cool blue color everyone was used to. His eyes were now a menacing violet hue with concentric rings, with tomo markings swirling around hypnotically around the pupil. Suffice to say, the team was mesmerized by the sight. Whoa! Summer leapt across the table and got really close to Naruto, watching his eyes like a hawk. What are these? They're super cool. His eyes changed. That's freaky, man, Kirao backpedaled in shock. Tai was simply observing the scene, but one could see his excited expression. Might this be an ability of some sort? Glinda wasn't too fazed by the revelation, being calm and collected as always. Naruto smirked a bit at the odd reactions he was receiving. He always liked showing off and being praised for his achievements. Attention-seeking was in his blood, after all. He remembered how starstruck Emerald still got when he used a flashy jutsu in front of her. He rather enjoyed the feeling if he were honest. When I told you to open up, I most certainly did not mean, whip out the Rinne Sharingan, idiot. Naruto could practically feel Kurama palming his face in irritation, which made his smirk grow even wider. Either he becomes a hermit, or he reveals the Rinnegan at the tea table. What a loser. Kurama, do you always have to be so pretentious? Shukaku chimed in, coming to Naruto's defense. Doesn't seem befitting of the great nine tails, hehehe. You shut up, one-tailed trash panda. Why, you little— Naruto cut off the mental link as soon as Kurama pounced on his brother to fight him. He knew them enough to leave them alone during their roughhousing. Cute, but I'm not done. Naruto then waved his hand idly, which made his eyes pulse with power. And just like that, out of nothing, a square portal opened up in the middle of the room. The team's eyes widened in shock, and they tentatively leaned closer to look into it. It's beautiful, Glinda whispered as she looked into the portal. Inside were seemingly endless stars and galaxies, all laid about in a spectacle of enthralling beauty. The portal was merely a gateway to an infinite space, one she could not avert her eyes from. Damn. Kirao's gobsmacked face brought the most satisfaction to Naruto. You're not from this planet, are ya? As much as Kirao found the idea outlandish, there was really no other explanation. Tri-dimension. Naruto shot back cheekily. Kirao rubbed his forehead, contemplating his words. Then he looked up as realization dawned on his face. Back then, you were messing with me. I never stood a chance. Naruto simply nodded with a wide grin. Now you finally understand, chicken. He mocked, but Kirao's angry retort was cut short by Taiyang. Can you tell us what your world was like? And why did you come to ours? At this question, Naruto sighed wearily and ran a hand through his hair. His world. That was a can of worms he did not want to even look at. But he supposed he could give them a brief rundown of the general situation there. He was not telling them about his life as of yet, that was for sure. My world was dark. Naruto began, getting their full attention. We were always fighting over something or the other, and only recently did we achieve some semblance of peace. My world had a similar force like the Huntsmen. Only we were called shinobi. What does that mean? Summer timidly raised a hand. Shinobi means one who endures, but in short, it means ninja. Naruto replied, and he waited for the incoming outburst. Wow. Your people are ninjas. That's so cool. Did you wear a black suit and a mask? Did you move stealthily in the shadows? Did you spit fire and water and teleport and have a katana and shuriken and mmmph? Thanking Glinda, who had covered Summer's mouth, he continued. I know it sounds cool, but it really isn't. I was too blind to see it at the time, but my world was a mess. Ninjas were merely the weapons of the village, tools to be used for securing power. We were trained to be ninjas since the age of 6, even 5, if you were very talented. Hearing his statement, Summer's struggles guttered out and her eyes widened at the horrifying revelation. Tenderly prying herself from Glinda's grasp, she hesitantly spoke up. Does that mean that you— She gasped when Naruto tersely nodded at her. But that's horrible. Even Glinda was looking at him with sad eyes, and Kirao bowed his head a little. Summer couldn't imagine training children to fight at such tender ages. 6, 5. That's how old Ruby was. The thought of her little girl being trained how to kill other humans at such a tender age left Summer sick to the stomach. Ruby should play and eat cookies, not be drafted into the military. Her heart went out to Naruto, just glad that he was still alive and safe. Naruto smiled sadly at her. Yes, it was. But look on the bright side, ya know. Our generation finally ended the cycle of hatred. There are no wars anymore, and children can actually be just that. I guess it all worked out in the end, He gave a grin and a thumbs up. Summer sighed in relief, along with the rest of the table. Yeah, I guess, she murmured. And why did you leave your world and come to ours, then? You finally achieved peace, didn't you? Glinda asked him. Sharp as ever, this one. Nothing much. I got bored. Naruto said coolly. There was no point in explaining the whole story about the Biju to them right now. And he had indeed gotten bored of humans and their greed, which is why he left. Glinda blinked. You were bored? You left your planet because you were bored? Yep. Naruto replied, popping the pea. The huntress sighed tiredly and pushed up her glasses. That sounds just like you. Ah, thanks, Glyn. Let's keep this between us, okay? He asked, getting nods from the others. Another, came the excited cry, coming right up. Inside Ichimaki Ramen sat Cinder, who was gorging herself on her 10th bowl of miso ramen. She couldn't help it. The food was just so good, tangy, salty broth accompanied by soft noodles cooked to perfection. Every topping had a place in the dish, and they all amped up its flavor even more. Cinder she could not get enough. It had nothing to do with the fact that eating the noodles made her feel weird inside, and it wasn't from the temperature. She certainly did not like the warm fuzzy feeling that this lovingly prepared food was giving her. She was here for intel. Yes. Intel about the shop owner, surely. The more time she spent in his shop, the more she could observe him. And that was what her lady wanted, after all. And so, observe him, she did. And had a few bowls in the process. No harm, no foul. Naruto, or rather his clone, laid down the girl's ramen in front of her with a smile. He could feel that eating his food gave her some sense of tranquility, which is why he kept on feeding her. He wasn't even going to charge the girl for it. Her meal was on him. He could tell that she needed it. After a few more bowls, Cinder's appetite was adequately sated. Calling over the owner, she decided to get down to business. She prepared herself to recruit the blonde man as he came over. Yes, miss, what will it be? I rather enjoyed the food. You have my thanks. She smirked, making him nod in happiness. Thinking she had him, she decided to go for the gold. You see, I have an offer for you. My benefactor would like to speak with you. Hearing her words, Naruto narrowed his eyes. It seemed his hunch was correct. This girl was involved with some troublesome people. But this was still a kid, and Naruto couldn't simply kill her for being suspicious, easy as it would be. Oh, is that so? Yes, my lady would give you whatever you desire, in exchange for your help, of course. Humming, Naruto decided to play along. And who might your lady be? Tut tut. Do you think I'll just disclose her name? Cinder mocked him, but her words lacked her usual heat. She simply asks, and people obey. So will you. I'll ask nicely. The blonde began as his Sharingan swirled into existence. Who are you, and who is your boss? Cinder's eyes glossed over, and a Sharingan pattern appeared in them. My name is Cinderfall. My lady is Salem, the queen of the Grim, she replied robotically. And what has she done for you to follow her? Naruto didn't care what Salem did in her free time, but he did care if she was recruiting children to her cause and manipulating them. It reminded him of Danzo too much. She has simply promised me power, power beyond my wildest dreams. And why do you follow her? Is it for power? Even though Cinder was speaking emotionlessly, Naruto could feel a certain sadness in her voice. I want power, so I will never be weak again. Naruto decided to cut off the genjutsu before it became too personal. Cinder hadn't really done anything wrong yet, so he didn't want to pry any more than need be. But what he heard was concerning. Who knew how many people Salem had already manipulated? He could not save everyone, of course, but if someone showed up in front of him, he would at least try to help. He needed to talk her out of serving Salem, just like the old days. And he knew exactly how to do it. Naruto could have simply brainwashed the girl into changing her loyalties, but he would not stoop so low. He could sense that the girl wasn't evil, she was just hurt. But his experience told him that her quest for power would bring her a lot more pain, so he decided to try another approach. Just before Cinder came to, Naruto grabbed her wallet, stole all her money and returned the empty wallet to her purse. He also placed some more stacks of empty bowls next to her existing bowls. Naruto grinned at his innovative idea, as he was sure to succeed. Cinder picked up where she left off as if she didn't remember anything. So will you come? I'll think about it. Before Cinder could retort, Naruto looked at her pointedly. Better yet, how are you going to pay for all the ramen you ate? This isn't a charity, ya know? Cinder looked confused at the question. What are you on about? Of course, I shall be paying in cash, she began confidently but trailed off as she looked at her empty wallet. It was only empty because Naruto had emptied it, but she didn't need to know that. She gulped in anxiousness. She had seen the video to know that this man was stronger than her. There was no point in trying to intimidate him. Cinder nervously looked at the massive stack of bowls. Had she really eaten that much? Then to the empty wallet. And then to the sweetly smiling, stupidly powerful shop owner. Sorry, Cinder squeaked, momentarily forgetting her arrogance. Welcome to your new part-time job, young lady. Thanks for watching. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.